Okay, folks, we will get started.
You got the message about Matt, right?
I did, yes. Okay, this is Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. This is Town Council Meeting 21-25. We are in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, Maine. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Okay, next order of business is roll call. Councillor Egan.
Here.
Councillor Lawrence.
Here.
Councillor Pilch.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Smith.
Present.
Councillor Benoit is here and present. Councillor Pillsbury will be here probably in a few minutes. Our next order of business is to waive a reading and accept as printed the September 16th, 2025 meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Moving on to announcements. Tax bills were mailed out at the beginning of October with a first installment due date of 11/17/2025. We have openings on various boards and committees. Please see the town clerk if you are interested in the vacancy on the Freeport Sustainability Committee, Cable Advisory, or Shellfish Committee. We also have 2 openings for student representatives on the Police Advisory Committee. Absentee voting for the November 4th election began yesterday and will continue through Thursday, October 30th. There are several ways to absentee vote. Please call the clerk's office for more information or assistance. The award for Freeport Citizen of the Year is given annually to a Freeport individual or community group that has substantively contributed to the quality of the town, the well-being of the citizens, and the reputation of Freeport, that has caused a measurable improvement in the circumstances of a significant number of townspeople. Persons employed by the town of Freeport are sadly not eligible. The name of the honored recipient or group will be permanently displayed on a plaque located in Town Hall so that all may remember their service and contributions. Deadline for submission of candidates is December 31st, 2025. The town offers 2 times for residents to stop in to discuss issues of importance or provide feedback on town operations. We have public drop-in hours with town council leadership the first Monday of every month at 8 a.m. Public drop-in hours for the town manager are on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month from 4 to 5 p.m. Any announcements from the rest of council? All right. Moving on to information exchange. This is an opportunity for councilors to share conversations with constituents or community events or committee meeting updates. Councillor Egan.
Just briefly, the group formerly known as the Housing Task Force met last week with good guidance from Brett Richardson and took a look at what some of the action that we're looking at today and chimed in at the planning board right after that meeting to support the language change for the height adjustment to clean things up. And it was just really encouraging to hear how much alignment is actually happening with the planning board and the ordinance. It's mundane work to get into the syntax and paragraphs of ordinance change and ordinance adjustments, but I just really want to applaud the staff for slogging through that and actually clarifying a whole bunch of stuff so that anybody coming into town hall could read it and understand what it says, or at least that's the goal we're heading for. Even though the Housing Task Force, formerly known as, isn't regularly meeting, the members all contributed that they'd like to remain in touch and available, and I think there'll be probably ad hoc gatherings with Brett and Kyle later on this year and into 26.
Councillor Pilch.
Just quickly, last night there was an event at the library, Meet the Candidates, which was lovely. And I just want to express some thanks for hosting that. And also, I think it's going to be posted online somewhere. While most of the seats are not contested this year, I think there are 3 people running for 2 school board seats, so there is one race that's contested, and it's a nice way to watch and see what the candidates have to say. So I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to run, too, if you're thinking of joining town politics.
Yeah, and a special thanks to RSU 5 community programs and the Freeport Community Library for doing the heavy lifting on that. It was a great event.
Just a note that Municipal Facilities Committee that would normally meet next Monday, because that is a holiday, we are meeting the following Monday, so it'll be just before the next council meeting. But Complete Streets will meet next Tuesday. I'm sure there will be conversation about many things related to traffic and parking, but the Bowen Main Street intersection will be reviewed once again by Complete Streets, as well as, I think, ongoing concerns about the Exit 22 bridge and Mallet Drive, and that the work that's continuing to go on there. There were some constituent concerns that were raised yesterday morning at Coffee with Council leadership that we'll be bringing to Complete Streets about the fact that the multimodal pedestrian cycling pathway that will be finished on the bridge does not yet connect to anything. And I think the committee will need to have some conversation around recommendations about how to make that clear while there is work that connectivity is still coming.
Councillor Egan.
Just one more thing. This past weekend, if you didn't get a chance to be downtown, you missed what was maybe the most beautiful, most crowded, most vibrant part of our community in quite a long time with the Fall Fest. I'm hoping it was a big success. I haven't talked to anybody from Visit Freeport yet, but I certainly saw tons of people and just literally sat on the sidewalk and had a cup of coffee and smiled for a couple hours. It was great.
That was on my list to share if nobody else did. I absolutely agree. It was a wonderful event. So congratulations to Visit Freeport for pulling off a great weekend. And I also want to say thank you to Public Safety. I saw them out and about throughout the weekend doing a great job keeping everybody safe. All right, anything else? All right, well, with that, we will move on to our committee updates. So we have Bill Rickson from Metro for his monthly update on his placement there.
Hi, I'm Bill Rickson. I live at 66 Varney Road, about a mile south of here, and I've been the town representative for GP Metro, the Greater Portland Metropolitan District. I don't know if I have anything new to report since the last time I spoke with you, other than the fact that I'm on the Marketing and Communication Committee, and one of the things that I'd like to get the word out here in Freeport that the bus runs 17 times a day. You can go to Portland or up to Brunswick, and service runs from about 6 in the morning to 9, 10 o'clock at night. So it's runs almost hourly, so it's a great thing. I've been riding it for the last 10 years since its inception, and it's been really wonderful to watch the increase in ridership and also the diversity of the people riding the bus. It's pretty remarkable. It's a whole community of people that you don't see if you drive cars. I know we're a very car-centric culture. But it's interesting. There's a lot of young people that have chosen not to have cars and get around otherwise. And so we're really fortunate to have the Breeze. And it'd be great if more people in Freeport could take advantage of it. Back earlier this summer, Breeze started a special service up to the Bath Iron Works. And in July, I went up on that day, and they had a commemoration for that, for this beginning of service. People from the state spoke, people from Bath Iron Works spoke, and it was interesting to talk with people from BIW and the work they're doing trying to get people who work there to use the bus, to take public transportation, to leave their cars at home. Otherwise, I don't have a whole lot more to, anything new to say, but maybe you have questions about what's happening with Metro.
Any questions for Bill?
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. Great. Thank you.
I just want to say a note of thanks to the Metro drivers who are navigating, like all of us, the construction going on right now around Exit 22 and Route 1. I've been in front of or behind several Metro buses that were having to deal with quite a lot of traffic related to that and navigating, taking Route 1 versus 295, and they've been quite diligent in terms of trying to stay on schedule despite all of those things.
Great. Good. I'll pass that word on. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. All right, and then we move on to our Freeport Economic Development Corporation monthly update. We have Mary Davis and Tawny here.
Good. It's actually, while Mary fiddles with the computer, I'm just going to digress, and we're going to have a little moment of fun facts. Actually, just one fun fact. But so related to the chamber, we have a golf ball drop on Thursday, October 16th. And historically, the event has taken place at Gritty's, really, since its inception. We wanted to bring it back and happily wanted to pivot, and this year we'll be hosting it at Maine Golf. And Brian's here, you guys. So that's so cool because that has become such a wonderful, wonderful gift to our community to have Maine Golf invest in Freeport, to choose Freeport out of so many of their locations to invest here. So we're honored to host the event there, but that's not the fun fact. So we have had a hot air balloon drop golf balls before. We've had a helicopter a fire truck for many years. At one point, we had a helicopter, and so just with the cost of things being what they are, we said, why not look into actually bringing the helicopter back? That's kind of a cool idea. And so I reached out to the only helicopter pilot I know, and I don't know if any of you know, but that helicopter pilot is our very own Chip Lawrence. So next Thursday, if you would like, we would be honored to have you come over to Maine Golf to check out the course and the new facility and see this man driving a great big red helicopter into Freeport. It's going to be very cool, and Chip's so flexible, and he just has such a passion for flying that we've added in as an auction item, we're going to do a sunset cruise for up to 3 people, and Chip will be doing that. I am actually kind of timid when it comes to this stuff, but I am going up in the helicopter with Chip. We're like picking it up together and moving around, and I have so much faith in him because he just loves it so much. So anyway, next Thursday, we'll see you over to Maine Golf.
Are you dropping the golf balls from the helicopter?
Yes, awesome. We are. And he's so casual about it. He was like, is that, I'm like, Chip, just a second. I'm like, is that fine? He's like, sure, no big deal, as long as it's strapped in, whatever. Yeah. The event's 4 to 6 at Maine Golf next Thursday. Okay, so now we'll get on to our formal presentation. No, Mary, you're going to start. Okay.
Well, I guess you know who we are. Mary Davis, president of FEDC, and Tawny is not only with the chamber, but she's also executive director of FEDC. We're so excited. So go ahead, the next one. So I brought this to you last time, which was about sort of how do we create this economic sustainability in Freeport. But I have to reflect a moment with a very quick story. A month ago, when I was not here, I actually was in a small town in Sicily. And this wonderful small town was destroyed by an earthquake in the 1960s. And part of this glorious time that I had there was I got to speak with the mayor of this little tiny town who talked about what it was like to rebuild the economic ability of a town when it was completely decimated by an earthquake. And she talked about how it was her job to bring the community together. It was her job to try to find hope. It was her job to try to bring people together to not only rebuild the city, but most people had lost their homes. So it was really a devastating thing. But she talked about how it was the little things that happened within the community that now 40 years later, the community is active. There's young people in there. They did things like they brought street artists in to put street art on the sides of the buildings that were completely destroyed by the earthquake. And it created this kind of tourist attraction that now people from all over Sicily go to see. the friend that I went with, she brings lots of Americans there. And so the mayor meets with my friend every time she comes because this woman brings so much money in to the town to spend in the town. And I walked away from that, came back here, read all the stories about Congress Street and how bad it is, and just realized for a moment we need to celebrate because we're not in that devastating place. In the last how many years has it been, Dan? 8 or 10 years. We've taken lots of those little steps that have gotten us where we are now. And we kind of forget about that. And it's kind of messy in the middle, and sometimes we get things that are kind of kerfluffles, but that's just part of the change that comes along with getting us to where we want to be. So my reflection is, in a moment, we just have to celebrate. We are collaborating together. We are working together. We are making big changes, and it's just marvelous to see what we have done. It's really, really exciting. So there's my reflection moment of being in Sicily with this wonderful woman. Okay, so these are the things that are about how we do back. Like, it has to be the right vision and plans. We know we have them. We have to think now of vacancies as just ongoing management. Because you're going to see, again, we still have this great low vacancy rate. It's understanding all the levers and implementing the plans. We keep talking about these here, and we all play an incredible role in making this happen. The council, the town, the citizens, the boards, all of these not-for-profits, Visit Freeport and doing, all of us have so much that we have to do to make this happen. And we can't take our foot off the pedal because there's a lot of towns that want to be like us, and we need to be in front of those. Not that I'm competitive. Okay, go to the next slide. So I want Tanya to talk a little bit about some of these cool things around collaboration.
Yeah, so Mary is right. We are so privileged to be able to go out and about, and you know, we were once the poster child of vacancies, you know, during COVID and so forth. And and it irritated, right? And it bothered me. I'm like, why are they picking on us? There's vacancies everywhere. Well, it was because it wasn't like us. Because we've historically been such a vibrant town, and for them to see Freeport suffer, that's why we were the poster child. But yes, those days are starting to be in our rearview mirrors. And as Mary said, we need to keep doing things to make sure that doesn't come upon us again. And so we are able to attend conferences and bring that information home, from Maine Biz to our connection with the Portland Chamber. We have been invited to other towns. One of those, it was the Bath District, invited us up to speak with them, to meet with their committee that works on their downtown district, and including their mayor. And last night, they just released this as a compliment to us. They let us know that they created a FIT-UP grant, just exactly in the same tone that Freeport has created. And honestly, when I went to that meeting, they had pretty much made up their minds with their vacancies that they were going to do what we just saw down in Portland, and they were going to penalize the property owners when they had vacancies. They didn't have very good relationships with a lot of those property owners, which is also different for us here in Freeport. So it made it very easy for me to say that I disagreed with that process, and told them about what we're doing here in Freeport with the FIT-UP grant. And as you can see, as a result, it made the difference for them to completely go in the other direction, and including like having it actually be a grant and not just a 0% loan. Like, they went with the exact program that you created here in Freeport because of the success that we saw, and the success that we have with our property owners. Because it matters so much to our property owners and to people looking at businesses. I've said this before, so I apologize for repeating myself, but when people come to think about opening businesses in Freeport, they're not just looking in Freeport, they're looking in other locations as well. And when we're able to talk about the FIT-UP grant, it sends such a message to them, such a welcoming, not just the financial part, that does matter. You don't see everybody take it though, because they might not necessarily need it, but it's the message that you want them here that is really making a huge difference. I can't even express with the right English words how much it means to them and to property owners as well, because we have seen some of these larger spaces in particular sit empty for a long time, and I'm going to use it as an example at 42 Main Street where the chamber office was. That building had sat there empty for over a decade. Such a large building, but it lacked a bathroom on the first floor. And so That was a very, very big expense, over $50,000 to put in the right bathroom, and the FITUP grant was so very, very helpful to that local user to have that support. So, so thank you. It truly is making a difference. Go ahead, Andy.
I do want to say one thing. Look at who this is. Go back once.
Oh, Katie. Our LL Bean Katie. She's not here tonight. Jason is. But look at Katie. I was so proud of her.
So cool.
Can you believe that magnificent woman hasn't even hit 40? She's doing all that she's doing, and she's not even 40. It's incredible. I don't know how you, like, if you vote for them or what you do, if you just like it or share it or what you do, but I'm doing all those things for Katie because I'm so proud. You know how much she's advocated to move Freeport forward, and here she is. Matt, you want to go ahead? Yeah.
She also talks a lot, talk about collaboration. She talks a lot about Freeport and what Freeport has done, and is a very, very good spokesperson for us. So this, again, collaboration is key to how we do business. Okay, so let's talk about some of the successes that have happened since we talked to you last.
So you guys have probably hopefully seen this, and I agree with you, John. The Freeport Fall Festival was such a great way to showcase our town and to have the doors open of some even more. We have continued to have more stores. King's Head, much, much needed restaurant in town. The owner invited us in, and they hadn't even really officially launched the opening yet. It was day 3 for them. And Justin, the owner, said that the Freeport location has already outperformed any of his other locations. That includes Portland. So that was incredible. Mallet Building, another building that had been empty for a very long time, is a combo with what the actual fudge on the top floor and Sparta Sips and Suds on the bottom. Realm of Legends, who I just spoke to, is also open, and I have a story for you, too, about them. So they're my neighbor, because I'm on what they call the ground floor. Don't call it the basement, because then it doesn't sound lovely. But I'm on the ground floor now of 42 Main Street, so I'm the neighbor with Realm of Legends. I went upstairs. I visit him often, but last week I was upstairs, and I said, how are things going? And he said, John, it's going to be really crazy today. I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on? He goes, Pokemon, new card coming out today, new card. I'm like, all right. But he's busy. He said, he's actually reaching the numbers he didn't think he'd reach till year 2. And he's already reaching those numbers now. He's open at night. He has people in there actively gaming until 10 o'clock at night on the weekends. And again, that number is almost doubling as each weekend passes. And so I asked him if I could simplify some of the success into one very small phrase. And I said, could we simplify some of your success is because you offer, you're experiential. And he said 100%. He said, I feel like that is what separates me from other retailers. Why my lights are on later at night is because he does offer an experience. And we know that that was part of the formula of success for Freeport. Also, you may not have seen, but yesterday, Bay Bowls opened. That is in the former Sip House location. This is actually their Bay Bowls' 4th location. They're all individually owned. But they, as they decided to grow, Freeport was 100% on their wish list. They wanted to be in downtown Freeport, no question about it. That's where they knew they would find success. So if you get a chance, please go in and try them. They have fresh fruit brought in every single day. Nothing's frozen. So it's a great addition. I've seen lots of different people in there the last couple of days, lots of high school kids. And so, what's going to help them is that we visit them. We also have a few in process, some that I can speak of and some that I have to tell you about hopefully next month. But I've told you a few times about Crepe Elizabeth. She is still coming, and she will be opening in the Hose House. I also want to thank you because this is one of those projects where hasn't opened yet because it's been met with some challenges. And the town of Freeport staff has worked so positively with the property owner, who is Scott Gleason, by the way, former counselor, and Dawn from Crepe Elizabeth. There hasn't been a hurdle that they haven't been able to overcome together. And so it's been really a fantastic process. So I'm grateful for town staff who have been able to help with that process. We have 2 spaces in the village station that will be occupied soon, but leases haven't been, the ink hasn't dried yet, so I can't quite tell you, but those are in process. So I'll be able to hopefully let you know about those next month.
go to the next slide. Okay, so we keep talking to you about the vacancy rates are low. This was literally calculated as of the end of September at a 5.1% vacant rate in the village. This is calculated by square footage, which we figure is the best way to do it. That way, when we get penalized for big empty spaces, this is unbelievable. We haven't seen vacancies like this in many, many, many years. And that's true Lower Main Street, Route 1 South. These are all extraordinarily good vacancy rates. Now, but we can't take them for granted, because once we get here, you know, it's like being first in your race. You have a lot of people chasing you then. So the remaining spaces are large spaces, and most people want then the national companies to be in those. And national moves a lot more slowly. It's also a little bit harder for us to infiltrate into that. So those spaces are going to be a little bit harder for us to fill, but of course we're still chasing on those. We're going to conferences. We're making connections to help us get into that. And turnover is normal in the industry. There are going to be retail stores that, you know, become less popular and go away, and things that become more popular. So I think one of you, Matt, I think it was you one time, you asked a question about how do you stay ahead of that. Tawny stays ahead of it by knowing the owners of the buildings, so that when something starts to come up, and actually that Bay Bowls was one of those situations, there wasn't a vacancy because Bay Bowls was there basically at the same time. So it's really important, our connections, back to how we communicate with people. It's important, our connections, so that even though the normal is, that turnover is normal, we need to stay ahead of it. Great relationships with landowners makes a huge difference, and we're seeing that they want businesses to succeed. They're being really flexible about how they're promoting occupancy in terms like, try it, see if it works. But, you know, reasons for turnover are not always obvious to us. Landowners are not going to always say, you know, here's what went wrong or right or whatever. So turnover is just going to happen, and it's really important that Tawny knows about it and that Tawny stays on top of it. Anything else you want to add? Our decisions, however, still remain really, really important. How we use the TIF, you're going to hear about that tonight. Those are really important things to us about how we work with the downtown and how we use the TIF. How we use parking is really important to us. The businesses, you know, had a lot to say with it. Zoning changes in what we do, the fit-up grants. So all these little decisions that we continue to make are the really important thing about how we keep vacancies low, how we keep filled, and how we continue to grow that downtown. Go ahead to the next one. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, so I probably have hit on a lot of this stuff because I'm crazy about this kind of stuff. Okay, I'm going to digress again, though, because one time I was on vacation, and I was actually on vacation with a bunch of developers, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so much fun, because I'm going to be able to pick their brains about this and that while we're on vacation. And come to find out, they wanted to, like, talk about pickleball and sailing and tennis and all that, and I was like, damn, I still want to talk about development. So I am crazy about this. So I may have already said this, but yes, again, the example, I skipped ahead, but Crave Elizabeth, again, was where it's just a great story about the town staff working together to overcome hurdles and to keep going, you know, because sometimes time kills deals, because people come in enthusiastic about something, and then time goes on and they can just lose their enthusiasm, and what that shiny apple isn't quite so shiny anymore. So, but with this kind of support around both parties, it's really one of the things that I'm seeing is working really well. And again, the fit up grants, I can't say enough about them, how they're sending such a great positive message. And then another thing that's setting us apart. Thank you for walking back in, Jason, but I have to say that, even if you ask ChatGPT right now why you should go to Freeport, it's going to tell you LL Bean. And that's true with people looking around to open up shops in here. They still want to be neighbors with LL Bean. They see LL Bean's successes, and we've seen this now when I'm able to go to national conferences. Somebody that's a tenant with LL Bean in Virginia, and they know that they can find success there, gets curious about what it would be like to be neighbors with them in the flagship store. So it's really what sets us apart from other towns. So I'm going to let Mary take us across the finish line.
Yeah. So I think, again, what we're trying to bring to you is there's a lot of things that have been put in place around having our vacancies filled, but we cannot stop now. There are folks out there who are renting at below average rents because they're trying to get us filled. We know the first big stone is get people here, because once you get people here, then you get more economic activity going on, and the more economic activity means that they can have their rates at the right places. So we can't stop what we're doing. We need to keep our foot to the pedal. So that's what we're here to say. Any questions for us?
Thank you. I will mention that Bay Bowls was the latest recipient of a Fit Up grant as of yesterday. And just to kind of remind counselors that this is a very impactful program as we think about the future of it in the next couple of months.
Yeah, it is great. So Babel's will be putting a small deck on front of their business, which is just, I think it's going to be so helpful as she looks across the street and sees what Melissa's done. You know, we had our very first meeting at Melissa's to discuss, you know, them coming to town and where they wanted to be. They were toggling between a couple different locations. So again, within the business community as well, there's a lot of partnerships. Melissa was so welcoming to them from the very first sit down that we had. Ella Bean actually was at the meeting as well, and it just, you know, telling stories of their success. So just bringing people together, surrounding them with that kind of support from the beginning is really separating us from other towns.
Any questions? Councillor Egan.
I wonder, thanks for the great data. I wonder how much of the buzz, for lack of a better term, how much of the buzz comes back the other way? We're getting some feedback here about your business owners saying they like this and they like that, and the business fit up, or the fit up grant obviously has had a huge impact. But how else could we hear about what's coming from the businesses as opposed to what we're trying to do to attract, which is very important, but I think it's just as important as a year in, hearing sort of what went well, what might we have done differently in our first year, whether it's what the town did or whether business decisions or relationship between the business owner and the landlord or the building, if they're different. I'm just wondering, do we have a mechanism to kind of capture that and keep that dialogue going? I really appreciate the enormous nuclear energy to get the spaces filled. I just want to make sure that we continue that relationship and can build on that. And as a small example, we had a big splash when Liberty Graphics opened here. But because I had a connection with them, I wanted to go in and hear more about what was happening from them, from their store. And they were like, great, like pull up a chair, let's talk. So I'm curious to know what tool do we have, or what design do we have to actually start kind of cultivating that feedback from the business owners back up.
And we can report more formally on that on our next month when we report, because that's could be kind of a different angle that we don't often take with you. But one of the things that I can say that I hear when you talk about like Liberty Graphics and other businesses on those off streets is signage. You know, having more, you know, the opportunity, and maybe just don't look sometimes, you guys, but like there might be a sandwich board out that isn't supposed to be and so forth. And that's their sort of way of saying, of trying to bring people down some of those side streets, as sometimes they feel like they miss out on some of that foot traffic. But we can, oh, and by the way, I'm gonna go back to Liberty Graphics. Taylor Swift was caught wearing a Liberty Graphics t-shirt with sea otters on it. It's a big deal. So we have them right here in Freeport. That's so cool. But yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm hearing, but we can bring back some more of those details for you.
Right. I think, John, that is an important thing about it, because when I'm out with Ms. Freeport, businesses really give her the skinny on what's going on, how their business is going, what's working, what's not working. And you're right, we haven't brought that to you, but we can put that into a format that we can bring to you more.
I'm not trying to make more work. I'm just
No,
saying,
no,
I'm
it
hoping
isn't.
there's a mechanism. I figured there was. So
Yeah.
it would be just great in our updates to
Absolutely.
hear
Yeah.
after year one,
Yeah.
here's the
Right.
6 things.
And
we'd like
that
to
some
see.
of that information,
It's important.
Yeah, we do share at a little more confidential level. So we do share a few more of those behind the curtain details at FEDC. But we can bring so that, I guess, thinking about it, there is some sensitivity in some of it, but some of the more obvious things we can certainly bring to you.
Right.
Great.
Right. And put the mechanism in place, because you're right, it has to be a plan to check. And so it's how do we check on it to make sure everything's going as we thought. Yeah,
Thank you.
got it. Yep.
Along, excuse me, along the lines of John's question, do you get any feedback about the videos that Tom makes about businesses? I know the first one that came out was about AEC engineering, and it's like, wow, what a great mechanism. He's an amazing producer, and I'm just curious if you hear anything. And
You know, I mean, I think you're going to hear this from every business. They're all going, why isn't anybody watching my reels? How come I'm not getting enough likes? Like, so no, I can't tell you that I do hear that. I think some businesses are more focused on their own sort of pushes and asking us to circulate those. So, but I don't hear that per se, but I saw it.
maybe something that could be
Yeah.
done to
Yeah.
message
Yeah. Thank
the
you.
world.
Steve. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so then now we will move on to our town manager's report. Sophie, take it away.
So Brett is going to assist me today, but while he is getting ready, or I'm getting ready with his presentation, I just want to make you aware of a couple of things. First is that we received notice this week that our 2024 annual report was awarded second place or superior in the 5,000 plus population category at Maine Municipal. I would just, that was Chris's last annual report before she takes a support role for our communications, and we are actually redoing it, but she did such a great job on that. I wanted to make sure. That was for 2024, so we just got it for last year. We're working on 2025 right now. I think a couple of counselors may have gotten called about needing an updated picture for the report. If you haven't heard it yet, Tom's just going to take care of me. Then you will. I also wanted to just make you aware that the state's making some progress on the rules around implementing LD 2003 and LD 1829. The rules just came out. I will send you a link to those rules. We have until October 31st if there are any particular comments we want to make. However, Representative Sachs has been working with our planning staff to address some of the issues that I just briefly brought to her attention, where it really feels like Freeport is being penalized for being forward-thinking and really trying to understand where large-scale housing complexes would work in our community. And so she has been working with the speaker, Ryan Fecto, and we'll continue to work through that, and as I have more to report, I will let you know. And I'm going to turn it over to Brett, who has been the tip of the spear with regard to overseeing and trying to manage the Main Bow intersection project. I would just like to, am I saying this or are you? Go ahead. All right, I'll say it. I would just like to recognize that while Brett is on camera and the face and planning has been in the bright vests, that our public works and public safety teams have been really working diligently behind the scenes and working hard to try to make this project a success. So.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Sophie. Brett Richardson, Development Director. We got a good, positive update tonight. We've learned a lot. And to sort of echo what Sophie said, one of the things that we've learned is that even quick build trials are not simple. They're not easy. We've learned a lot. And frankly, through that process, Earl and his team have invested a tremendous amount of time to respond to some of the issues. Nate Goodman, the chief of police, and his team have been a really good conduit for information and feedback. Visit Freeport has done a nice job reaching out to the tour buses to help them understand what we're trying to do. So we just wanted to really make sure that It was clearly stated that this has been an interesting process. We've learned a lot, and it's been a good effort on Earl's part and his team. So next slide, if we could. Real quick, I'm going to share some updates on the data that we found. Before we do that, I want to remind folks of how we got here. And it all started back in 2022 with the downtown vision and the concept that came out of that from the principal group that you'll see on the inset there on the left, the idea to slow down the intersection, create some more placemaking opportunities. And then this bigger vision here with this pretty picture with that intersection tightened up, pedestrian crossings much tighter and shorter and safer, more public space, street trees. That's a fresh iteration from June that Jeff Speck drew as a follow-up to the presentation that he did in June at the Performing Arts Center. So the idea here is this idea has been in the works for a while. We've been working on it and refining it behind the scenes, and this trial that we saw today is out in Main and Bow today is really an experiment to test that and learn from that. So if we can do the next one. We started working on this coming out of that presentation in June, and the first idea that came from Stantec was really a transformative demonstration project. It was about putting barriers in the road that allowed the public space to be activated, tight intersection that was a little bit different than what we saw on the ground. But because by the time we got to this, it was August, we know that the snow starts to fly, later in the fall and in the winter. And then it was a big lift for Earl and his team that it was deemed a little bit too complex to do on a short term that would have to be removed after 8 to 10 weeks. So we got the directive then to come back with the desire to do something quicker and simple that we could execute this fall. And so what we came back with input from DOT, was a quick build concept that didn't use barriers. It used the posts that you see out in the intersection today, delineators, a little bit different configuration that we learned a lot from. For example, if you can see, the space that was reclaimed at Bow and Main was in the middle of the lane from Bow heading on to Main, whereas the Stantec design actually had the traffic moving in that lane. And so if you think about some of the big vehicle traffic that had issues early on, had we used that middle lane with the big vehicles, the right-hand turn would have been much more manageable. So through the process of going from the original vision to the quick hitter hybrid that you see out today, we uncovered some issues and we discovered some of the value in the original design. So we learned a lot, but we think that we've got a good learning that we can build on and going into the future. And it's important to note that this trial that you see was not designed to be everything that the communities wished for. It was really a simple experiment to test whether traffic continued to flow with an all-way stop. So that was the goal that we were focused on. And the way we measured that was the number of queues for cars, how many cars lined up. And that was a sort of an understanding of how traffic was flowing. If cars backed up more with the all-way stop than they backed up without an all-way stop, then we could determine the impact on traffic. So that was the measuring stick, was how many cars would back up. We did a pre-trial count for a couple of weeks before the installation, and then we've been counting ever since then, including over the weekend here with the Fall Festival when the traffic was in town. And so that was a really interesting thing to observe how this intersection performed relative to the corridor as a whole. So that's how we measured. As I mentioned, we identified some issues, and Earl and his team, with input from a bunch of stakeholders, really were out there almost daily. As these issues were uncovered, they were out there making changes, moving things around, opening things up. The turning radius for large vehicles, it wasn't there. The visual clutter and pedestrian visibility that we hear about, those posts are, equipment-wise, relatively inexpensive. DOT provided them. But if you are a resident in town that hasn't been following this, and you see those posts, there's a reality to it, that they are a little bit confusing. They're not beautiful. They are at eye view, sort of, if you're in a car. And so some of the trial equipment that we used results in the perception of visual clutter And it's important to note that going forward, as we look at this intersection, that if we were to do it again, it would be different materials and that clutter wouldn't be there like that. So that's something to note too. And then public safety access and passage. This was a conversation that we had the last time we reported out, was concerns about public safety vehicles being able to navigate the corridor. We've continued to stay in touch with our public safety, fire chief and police chief, and they continue to see no real public safety risk with this. We're seeing public safety vehicles being able to navigate it. And I think what I've heard is that the Fall Festival this weekend harkened back to the prime time, of Freeport back in the day when that was a normal summer day to have that many people in town. And my understanding is that the public safety facilities and the through routes for the vehicles were in the same place then as they are now. And so it's a pretty good understanding from our police chief and fire chief that we can work with this. And we made some improvements to help with throughput. So the other part that we've learned a lot about is the bus parking and just how important that is and how tricky it is to communicate out to all the various commercial tour buses with a relatively short turnaround time and a lot of ingrained habits. And they're used to doing things a certain way. And so Visit Freeport has been a great partner to get the word out. But we've also learned that that's a really important asset to the community to have these tour buses coming in, and that we need to pay close attention to that going forward. Pretrial data collection, we looked at a couple times a day from each approach at the intersection. So southbound on Route 1 as folks approach the intersection, northbound, and then from Bow onto Main. We counted for 15 minutes. We counted the folks' pedestrian crossings because that interrupts traffic. We also counted the number of turns, vehicles making a left-hand turn because that impacts traffic. And then we counted the instances of 2, 3, 4, and 5 or more vehicles. Did that on a routine basis so we could see changes over time. Next one, Sophie, please. Here's the data. This is what we came up with. 11 a.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. It's important to note that we've sort of validated what I think many folks in town know is that roughly from 2:25 to 2:45 every day when the schools get out, that results in a fair amount of traffic. But we can see that over time, the pre-test generated, 3 to 5 two-car queues in a 15-minute window. So if you think about that, that's a car queue about every 3 minutes, right? 4 cars, 5 cars, it was a little bit lower. We've seen an uptick with the post, with the installation in. It's actually gone up a little bit more recently, and that could be to do with the traffic coming off of Mallet and the construction work there. It could be to do with the increased bus traffic and the influx of folks that we now see in the fall. But it's also important to note that what we're seeing from 2 to 5 cars, if you add those numbers up across, it's about 15 queues in a 15-minute period. So we're getting about 1 queue a minute, right? And they clear pretty quickly. And so we had a Village Corridor Initiative leadership team last week. Public Works, DOT, Stantec, Complete Streets, Town Council members who have been thinking about this, and essentially everybody unanimously came to the conclusion that, I think we can go to the next one, that this trial has essentially worked from the sense that it hasn't dramatically or significantly degraded traffic flow. We're still seeing quality movement through the corridor. We found that there's some issues that we uncovered with the hybrid quick build that I talked about a little bit earlier. We feel pretty confident that the issues have been mitigated during the trial. Not perfect, but we've taken steps to mitigate it. We've learned a lot, and with a time to design, we can eliminate those going forward. We can make sure that the buses have space to use where they need to go. We can make sure that we configure the lanes in a way that big vehicles can make the turn. And we can get rid of some of that visual clutter with different materials so that it's much more open and visible and less confusing for folks, as well as doubling down to make sure that the public safety vehicles have all the access that they need. One thing that's of note is that the flow from Bow Street onto Main, from the data that we've seen, is actually improved. I know there were a fair amount of folks that were really concerned that that's their sort of way to get into town. Because they now have a stop sign and folks stopping either way, they have a natural path and they don't have to be as aggressive or sort of, to try to force their way out into the lane. So that's been a positive. I want to say one more time that these trials, even if we do a quick build, it takes a lot of staff time and effort to pull it off and adjust and to learn and to grow together. And then probably most importantly at this point, because we've determined that from DOT's perspective, Stantec's perspective, the leadership team's perspective, that this has essentially been a positive to build on, that we've also learned as much as we're going to learn from the current trial. There's not much more that we can learn this fall. So I know Earl has a plan next Tuesday to pull the parklet out on 10/14. And I just want to put that in front of you guys, that we've learned as much as we can learn from this trial. That's what I have to share tonight. So I'd love to answer any questions.
So if I'm reading between the lines, are you suggesting we think about removing the three-way stop on the 14th?
I think it's worthy of consideration.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Any questions for Brett? Councilor Brown?
Could you go back a couple of slides?
For you, Counselor Brown, I can do it.
That actually, one forward. Yeah, that one. So just to be clear, 15-minute intervals means, for instance, start at 11, end at 11:15?
Correct.
So-
At one, so to follow your example, standing in front of Linda Bean's restaurant, focusing on the traffic on Bow, approaching Main for 15 minutes.
Okay.
Then moving to the next spot, 15 minutes, moving to the next spot.
Oh, for a total of 45 minutes?
Correct. Yep.
I see. So you are through the period, for instance, starting at 2, that's the most complicated, because the value of the most complicated is to really pay attention to safety and emergency vehicles and how they get through, and what's the negotiation that takes place when there's reduced ability to do that, seemingly. And I know I get the sense that it's working, and yet I feel the notion of emergency vehicle pass-through, especially ambulances, needs to be applied in a weighted average sort of way. In other words, if you or I have a heart attack, I'm making my point. I mean, it's really important that we get this right. So that's my observation.
It's a valid point. I want to really highlight something. This is probably small for you guys, but this festival, the pedestrian crossings were 3 times the average. I mean, that was busy. And from my experience coming into town, traffic northbound on Mallet was backed up to Justin's Way consistently, if not to Main Street, right? And even with that fact, and if you think about what the implications of that means, northbound can't move because there's nowhere to go. Bow and Main can't turn because there's nowhere to go. The increase in queues was pretty minimal, right? I mean, we sent an update to the village leadership team, and the feedback was Bow and Main was arguably the intersection that was working the best under that condition, and that the School Street intersection was quite problematic. So I think the festival over the weekend is a pretty good proxy for what peak summer traffic looks like. And I was very interested, and I came up on a Saturday to observe it for that reason, to make sure that I could speak knowledgeably to you all. And it really gave me more confidence in the overall finding of the leadership team from the week before, that with a straight face I can say that this passed the test of whether or not an all-way stop works from a traffic standpoint.
Brett, on that, can you explain pre and post, if you look at the pedestrian cross events, why is it at 3 p.m. like half from pre to post?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think it's actually, the post is actually fairly consistent.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
But the pre was taking place right as we were experiencing an uptick at the end of summer. We had school shoppers and stuff here. It was that last kind of 2 weeks.
2 weeks of August.
August.
Yep.
And then it kind of has gone down quite a bit. We've seen weekends where it's come up, but not weekdays. It hasn't been like that.
It's true.
Did we have metrics that we had going into this about what would have been successful versus not successful in terms of other data?
The simple for this project approach was to count car queues, and that was recommended by Stantec and DOT. So this is a new world for me, but I trust that they did it right. I think, part of the conversation that we had back in August was we may want to do a full trial, the full demonstration build out in the spring to make sure that we understand what's happening in the spring and the summer, but we wanted to do something simple and quick this fall. And so I think if the council has an appetite to follow through on that and to continue forward, evaluating this as an option, that we would have a period of time, a longer period of time, to have a much more robust view on how this all fits together. So we're talking about, putting the wires across the road that car tires go over and we get counts. We're talking about a more robust drone and video footage. We're talking about engaging with more lead time, our partners at DOT and PACS and GPCOG, to have access to that equipment that they've already committed months in advance. And so this, admittedly, is a fairly simple, but I think valid, study. With lead time, we can add more to it to get more granular data.
So this basically is showing that the queues weren't so bad that we should stop.
Exactly. Yep, it passed that test. It did not seriously degrade traffic.
Are we, if we roll this out for another pilot in the spring, are we going to would we expand the assessment to include other intersections along Main Street? And has the topic been brought up about looking at the number of pedestrian crossings we have and potentially moving some of them, or if some of them maybe aren't needed? I'm just wondering if that's even been a discussion point.
It was discussed at the leadership team meeting, and I encourage Councilor Smith or Councilor Pitts to weigh in, but essentially I think Stantec is going to look at that northern end of the corridor, perhaps south as well, and consider different traffic controls for those intersections, including Mallet and Main. They made the argument that it's worth looking at converting that intersection to an all-way stop to see if that keeps people moving. Because what you see when the light changes, it just piles up, 20 cars, right? And then the light changes and it clears. But there may be a way to have a moderately slower, if you were driving up to Mallet and you didn't hit the light and you had to sit there, that's a lot different than if you did hit the light, right? So your experience could be different over time, but over an average, an always stop might feel slower at first, but it's worth looking at to see if that actually over time moves faster and is more fluid, and also helps the pedestrian safety there at that intersection that we hear about school kids going to the library, and it's worth looking at. So the benefit of this is that we learned a lot in a high visibility situation, and we now have an opportunity to pause, take a breath, and look at the corridor based on what we learned.
I would reiterate much of what you just said, Brett, in terms of looking at those other intersections. At the Village Corridor Initiative leadership team meeting, we did have an extensive conversation about the fact that this is really not even necessarily the intersection of most concern for a lot of people, including members of that team, including a lot of the members of the public that we have heard feedback from throughout this test. And I think, first of all, in order to go ahead with a larger scale pilot, we would need to look critically to make sure that it was taking into account all of the learnings, and that some of the additional benefit of that reclaimed space might be evident, visible, but also that the visual noise that Brett talked about would be less evident, that it would really be designed in a way that would be much closer to the eventual potential reality. But also, I think that having learned what we could learn from this test, I think what we've learned is also limited without further tests on those other intersections. And so it's one thing to say that traffic is still moving with a three-way stop at Main and Bow. Can we demonstrate or test that that continues to be the case if we address the issue of Elm and School and Main? And then Mallet. And I think there is a general consensus that the intersection in Mallet is really the key issue to tackle, because that impacts all of these other intersections when that backs up. But I think there is, what we've certainly heard from a number of residents is that they are concerned, regardless of what happens with Main and Bow, is that the School Street and Elm Street intersection is really the next thing to tackle in addition to Mallet.
That's 100% what I heard too, and it's validated in the current draft current conditions report that we saw, which highlighted that intersection, School and Elm, as a high crash zone. From a DOT standpoint, that's a hotspot. So people's experience is validated by the data.
And I would just add that MDOT obviously is the key partner in all of this, along with Freeport Public Works. But MDOT is 100% on the same page about the need to address School, Elm, and Main, and Mallet as well. They understand that those are all issues.
I just want to chime in with a brief reminder that the first slide you showed, the vision that prompted all this, wasn't how many stop signs can we put on Main Street. It was, what can we do to generate a sense of place? What can we do about fixing this tiny little sidewalk in front of Patagonia? What can we do to recreate a town square and have it be a destination? So those are really the larger goals. You know, whether or not we wind up with a stop sign there or not, you know, that's a byproduct. That's not the main thing that we want to test.
That's right.
So in reference to the 14th, do any counselors have an idea of if they would prefer to keep the trial going or remove it now?
I think the last point on the last slide was we've learned all we can learn, you know, there's no point in keep prolonging it.
I would also just add, I think that was generally the plan, was mid-October for that to come up, with the possibility that it could come up sooner if the weather changed. And although we did have an incredibly warm weekend, I think that is all changing tomorrow. And I'm looking at Earl thinking that probably Earl's team would like to move forward sooner than later so that we don't have a rush to do it.
Earl, is that correct? Okay.
And just to make a key point too, DOT confirmed yesterday that we have enough data. They're satisfied with what we've done.
Can I just make the plug that we should be forward-thinking as to what we may do in the spring and message it at the same time as we say, hey, we're taking this down, because I think the last thing we want is to then implement changes in the spring and have people say, what are you doing? Where'd this come from? I thought we were done with this. Like, I think people need to understand the whole continuum of what we're looking at.
Right, and also I think that removing it isn't because of failure, it's because we're done with this phase. Yeah.
And you might want to iterate that it is traffic calming and trying to reclaim some of the sidewalk, because that's what we're trying to do. That's, I got a couple emails as well, that it's not broke, don't fix it, and it's, well, this is what we're trying to do. It's not.
Right, and the end goal, as Councilor Pilch said, could be very different. Yeah, or end use, end product, yep.
I think one option for that continued messaging would be to update, but keep the placement of the explanatory signs on the sidewalk. However, I realize that the people that are reading those are probably the pedestrians, not the drivers. So I think, obviously, messaging in all the other places we have messaged it, including the website. Although I don't know how many people will actually proactively look for that update.
Put a
So-
banner, thank you for your patience, test over.
If we
Phase two
allowed
will
temporary signs on Main Street, then we could do that, but we do not.
We could put one up till somebody takes it down, but.
That would be Earl, probably. All right, that sounds good. I think we agree. Go ahead and take it
Thank you,
down
Brett.
next week, and thank you, Brett. And will you talk to your team about messaging and making sure
I've been teamsing,
there's a
I
seamless?
have been teamsing a summary or a synopsis of Matt's suggestions. I did leave out the temporary banner so that Nick didn't have a problem with that.
So we don't give conflicting information here.
The last thing I just want to bring to council's attention is that there has been a statutory change to what municipalities need to do, councils and boards of selectmen, with regard to public comment during meetings. The good news is the rumors far exceeded what the actual rules are. But at the end of the day, Maine Municipal Association Legal Services is suggesting that we adopt policies that are a little bit more robust than what council's rules of order are. I have begun the process of collecting what other communities are doing, and am hoping that perhaps we could ask the ordinance committee to kind of vet the options of it. We could do it this way or that way, and bring up a policy back.
Could you give us a general sense of the requirements?
So the requirements are that we have to allow public comment, which we do, and they more specifically talk about the limitations of what we have in order, how you can control meetings. I know that's come up with both chairs that I've served under here, around kind of where's the line between free speech and not. The rules of order don't really speak to that. The guidance that we have gotten from MMA, I think, will help clarify some of that. It's talking about giving the community meaningful avenues to have input into or speak regarding the municipal issues in front of council. So at first, it was billed as they have to be able to speak on every single item. I think the idea is that you want to have robust opportunity for input, but there are some ways that you can limit that input. And our guidance actually also speaks a little bit to remote participation, which I know has been a little bit of a concern here. So my hope is that for the next ordinance committee meeting, which I need to get with the committee chair to schedule, I should have kind of a group of policies and a general idea of what we might want to do, incorporating that in with already with our rules of procedure. I don't think you really want to go through the process of amending those unless you see a problem with them.
Any questions regarding that, or anything from the manager's report? Okay. Well, speaking of public comment, we will now move on to our public comment period for folks who are here in person. Based on the interest on other business item number 2, which is our parking policy conversation, we will allow comment on that right now as well for folks who don't want to stay until the bitter end. So please feel free to step up to the podium. Reminder to introduce yourself and try and keep it to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening. My name is Jason Solom. I'm the manager of public affairs at LL Bean, and I did rise to speak today about the, what were the words that were used tonight? The regulatory options for paid parking being presented to the town council. So briefly, just as we've stated in previous public forums, we believe that paid parking is not only antithetical to Freeport's brand, but an undeniable economic threat to a town that's reliant on retail and tourism industries. As it has in Portland and Portsmouth and Providence and Burlington, Vermont, paid parking would hinder economic growth in Freeport by reducing dwell time, increasing the cost to visitors, limiting development and investment opportunities, reducing retail and entertainment revenues, and damaging Freeport's visitor-friendly reputation. We've learned a lot over the past century about what makes a business successful, and one thing we know for sure is that convenience starts long before someone comes to a parking spot. And we can say with certainty that paid parking is a deterrent to visitors and customers. It's a barrier to convenience, and we have data that supports this. Katie Wise has mentioned previously that in our 66 regional stores that we operate outside of Freeport, we recently had one in 2022 that instituted paid parking after we had already located there. And since that paid parking was introduced, traffic dropped nearly 10%, and the store loses about $500,000 annually as a result of that paid parking implementation. Paid parking means fewer visitors, which means fewer sales, fewer jobs, and fewer opportunities for all of us. And as we seek to locate 8 to 10 new stores now per year through 2030, we absolutely will not consider locations that have paid parking. And I've pointed to experiences in other towns, but we can also look to our own experience this past summer when we had paid parking for a weekend over 4th of July. Visitors were unknowingly ticketed. Others unnecessarily paid for spaces that were not part of the paid parking area. LL Bean in the town received complaints as most visitors thought it was us that implemented it, and it felt a bit more like chaos than a welcome to town. Lastly, I just want to note that the people of Freeport have spoken consistently, unanimously, and emphatically in opposition to paid parking throughout this process. And though you will be presented, as I've read through already, with 3 approaches for consideration, the hard data, the anecdotal data, and the voice of your constituents makes it clear that the best option is to fully prohibit paid parking. A prohibition can always be revisited once instituted, but paid parking would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to retract once it was allowed to be implemented. So in consideration of the data, the town's sentiment, and also the other consequential items that this town has to address, we just wanted to reiterate that a prohibition is the prudent approach and one that we support wholeheartedly. So thank you, and we hope that's the direction you pursue.
Thank you, Jason.
Hello, Jay Yilmaz, Holbrook Street, Freeport. And I would build on what Jason said about paid parking, that I don't support it. And I feel like it's antithetical to what Freeport, the image that we're trying to continue. And it's also, distasteful based on, how we've operated up to this point. There's a corollary that kind of goes along with the main reason that I wanted to get up here and speak. I wanted to thank Councilors Benoit and Egan for mentioning how successful this weekend was. And there were customers that couldn't find parking, which is kind of a good news. And we're getting back to a place that I knew we would. And I would just encourage those that have even considered the notion, and what I really think is the mythology that was based on some data, but maybe not the most accurate data, or data from a time when Freeport was slow, as was a lot of retail throughout the world and the country. And Freeport will come back. And it's not if it's going to come back, it's when it's going to come back. And the good times will be here again, and there will be many, many days like there were this past Saturday and Sunday. I took time to walk through the town, trying to find shade in between. It was smoking hot, and I checked every place. The church parking lot behind Meeting House Arts was full. I went into the parking garage, which was a rarity for me, but both levels were full. That was 1:45. There were cars circling, looking for spaces. Now, as I'm saying this, there was probably a space here and a space there, but the town was jam-packed. People parked in my parking lots on Holbrook Street that were not guests. It didn't bother me. I was happy to have them park there. And the rebuttal to this point that there was not enough parking was that there were tents, vendors on some of the parking lots. Well, if we put too much housing on some of these parking lots, there'll be a similar effect. So I just want to encourage those that are even questioning whether we have too much parking during these peak times, which will be this coming weekend through the fall, certain times during Sparkle weekend, and they're just windows of time, but it's these times that we really need access to full amounts of parking. So thank you for thinking about that. And John, thank you for your patience. I like that sign.
I'll have nothing to do with it.
I'll help
Somebody wants to see it, it's not me.
It was all John's idea.
Hi, good evening. Jared Levin from Tilton Furniture, and also a property owner in the downtown area of Freeport. I would like to echo, I read the memo that was titled Policy Options to Regulate Paid Off-Street Parking Downtown. It was helpful, and I would like to echo the sentiments of Jason and Jay that the council adopt option 1, which is not to allow paid parking facilities. For many of the same reasons that Jason and Jay mentioned, I did read through options 2 and 3. Now, option 3 is to basically have no regulation of paid parking, and I won't spend time talking about that. I believe, as Jay mentioned, that it's antithetical to the strategy and tradition of Freeport. Option 2, allow paid parking facilities with standards or restrictions. I really believe that going down that route would end up being a race to the bottom. I think if there's an option to have paid parking, even owners in shared parking who might not want to have paid parking, I think would quickly find that customers who might not have been frequenting their establishment will flock to the areas that don't have paid parking. I think it'll just be sort of a mess. I can't even imagine how we would have partial paid parking and partial not. I really believe the best option, at least for the foreseeable future, would be option 1, not to allow paid parking at all. I do say this notwithstanding the fact that I know that some entities would be harmed by not being able to realize value in the short term by having paid parking. And I truly hope there's an option to bridge to a time when there's increased demand again for long-term leasing of parking spaces. I think that time will come. But I make this recommendation really just for the good of the town as a whole. I believe that we have to, the best thing ultimately for all entities is to have a robust and healthy downtown. And I think, as I mentioned in past meetings, we want to maintain momentum and not backtrack here. I've just seen too many examples of towns that have gone the wrong way, and I'd like to maintain the momentum that Freeport is enjoying. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, if I could just add one more point about this issue of parking with regard to paid parking. If you got rid of that, but you lowered parking too much, there will be certain lots that could if parking became too limited. Lots like I have where Arlberg is, or 123 Main Street where British Goods is, or some other lots that I don't own, people could put up customer parking only. And so that's why we have to be very careful, not just with whether it's going to be paid parking, but whether we have enough parking to go around. So the less parking there is, you don't necessarily charge for it, but people will say customer parking only in my lot. So I just want you to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I change the subject?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for your service. My name is Daniel Freund. I live Chihawk Road in Freeport. I understand that the Finance Committee, the town manager, and perhaps the entire council have concerns regarding the sourcing of medical claims data and associated privacy issues. HIPAA was enacted in 1996, and throughout my entire career, extending to the past century, I have worked in an environment that observes HIPAA in addition to annual training for myself and my staff. Imagine 360 has a partnership with the Healthcare Purchaser Alliance of Maine. The alliance highlights Imagine 360 as a partner for employers seeking innovative health solutions. The Healthcare Purchaser Alliance is a nonprofit collaboration of private employers and public trusts dedicated to lowering healthcare costs and improving quality. Through collective action and innovative strategies, Alliance members drive the change they want to see in the healthcare market. The concern regarding PHI and HIPAA can be averted entirely if the town never receives the data. I confirmed with Imagine 360 that they will collaborate with Freeport and both trusts in the same manner, wherein data from the trusts will be sent directly to Imagine 360. Therefore, the town will never have access to any of the raw data. Furthermore, Imagine 360 would like to send the town information concerning other municipalities and school districts for whom they provide similar claim management services, a detailed description of their security protocols, a generic description of what the claim review will encompass, an invitation to engage in discussion with them, their representatives directly via email, webinar, or in person. Imagine 360 will not charge Freeport anything for the above services. If this is satisfactory, please advise to whom the Imagine 360 representative should send this information. Thank you for your consideration. I just want to close by saying the Pettingill Farm event this weekend was outstanding. And a shout out to the Freeport Historical Society and all of the organizers and volunteers and the outrageous support of the community. It was terrific, even if you weren't 4 years old and hammering things together. So I have a copy of these remarks if you'd like me to leave them, or I can. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other comment from the public? Andy?
Yeah, Andrew Arsenal, two topics. I guess I rise to support, as everybody else did, the no paid parking in Freeport. I think we need to separate the issues with the income-producing property with the actual use of parking in Freeport and how that generates people coming, going, how that works. So we need to, as we discuss paid parking in the future, we need to be able to separate those two issues. Second is, I had opportunity to go to Portland for a little thing down on the dock at DeMillo's. A privateer came in, reproduction of a privateer for the Revolutionary War, the Lynx, which was a lot of fun, but hadn't driven to Portland for a while and drove in Washington Avenue like I usually do, and you come to Cumberland Avenue, the light's gone. It's a four-way stop. No bollards, no things in the middle of the street. It worked wonderful. Driven through there many times. You get to Congress Street, there's a corner of Munjoy Hill, and four-way stop. No lights, no nothing. Didn't have all these obstructions in the middle of the street. That's a big, wide intersection. Everything worked wonderful. I got the copy of the Discover magazine the other day, and my father always told me at one point they had a light in the middle of Main Street. I looked at the cars, about a 1951 or 52 Ford and some older cars. There's the light in the middle of Main Street. So I think you could probably do it pretty well without all the barricades and out all the stuff. When I was a kid, I don't know if it was still the same when you came to town, Steve, but Edgar Layton had the corner store, and most of the side of Bow Street, we parked cars right up to Main Street. Edgar would have a sidewalk sale. There was parking right there. That claimed that side of the street. Eric, you must remember some of that, you know. And the street was a little narrow. We parked on Main Street. Traffic flowed. But I'm sure that you could just run it with a three-way stop of some kind of a light or a stop sign without all the barricades and out all the stuff. And just be a little organic about these things. People sort of regulate themselves. They don't need little pathways and rabbit holes and rat mazes. And so don't overcomplicate it. Let it be a little organic. Just make a three-way stop and be easier for everybody. I think it could run all year. Just plow it in the winter. I mean, get rid of that stuff you've stuck in the street and just put up a light or a stop or however you want to regulate it. So thanks.
Thank you, Andy. All right, any other comment? All right. So we will move on to item 129-25, which is to consider action relative to adopting our consent agenda. Any discussion on the items? You can tell appointments has been very busy lately. Thank you, Chris, for organizing all of that. All right, Counselor Smith, could you please read the be ordered?
Be it ordered that the October 7th, 2025 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next is item 130-25. This is a public hearing relative to proposed amendments to the general assistance ordinance. Before I open up the public hearing, Sophie, would you like to refresh our memory?
So I will refresh your memory to let you know that every municipality in the state of Maine is required to have a general assistance ordinance. The guidelines that we're given in terms of maximum guidelines or what we are allowed to assist people with is actually something that is created by the state of Maine. We follow these so that we can receive 70% reimbursement for our general assistance expenditures. So the appendices are what you're looking at this time, and then later on in the agenda, we will set a public hearing for the full ordinance, which came in after you had already set this public hearing. Do you want more information?
Could you explain the difference between the two on the agenda again?
Yeah, so this is a public hearing to look at the appendices.
Okay.
The appendices must be adopted every year. They are often changed by the Department of Health and Human Services. They are what set the maximum guidelines for overall the total income level that people could have, but also how much we're allowed to spend on each of the subsections, utilities, rent, food, those.
And that's all
things.
increased.
It usually does
Yeah.
increase, depending on what it is. If you look at the memo that Carrie, our General Assistance Administrator, provided, it shows that there are modest increases in overall maximums, rental maximums, food maximums, but the heat amount, because it's not a dollar amount, it's a gallons amount, that usually stays the same. I think there was a very small increase in the amount for mileage. Household goods and services, I'm not sure that those have really changed that much since I started doing this work, so.
Great.
And later on, it's the actual general assistance ordinance that tells us the process for managing general assistance.
All right, well, with that, I will open up the public hearing. So if anyone would like to speak on behalf of this item, you can head on up to the podium. Anybody online? All right, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Any discussion up here? Councillor Egan.
I'll just note for context that while the FMR rents appear to have gone up in the appendix, whichever one it was, for Cumberland County, which we would fall into as a HMFA, they're still considerably below what market rents are, and certainly below what the affordability is for somebody who does not have rental assistance or potential GA. So they're catching up, but they're still behind where the market is.
I talked at length to Carrie, our GA administrator, about that, because the question I asked is, are we having problems with what we are able to offer, getting people housing? And what we're finding is the ability to get housing is so limited that when we are finding housing, it is tending to be in Bath or, like a more rural area where it's lower, or through the Housing Navigator and opportunities in Portland, which tend to be subsidized.
All right. Counselor Brown, could you please read the be it ordained?
Sure. Be it ordained that proposed amendments to Chapter 46 General Assistance Ordinance Appendices A through H for the period October 1st, 2025 to September 30th, 2026 be adopted.
Second.
All right, any last questions or thoughts? All in favor? Aye. Great. Okay, moving on to item 131-25. This is a public hearing relative to amendments to Chapter 21, the Freeport zoning ordinance. We have Kyle Drexler here to introduce the item.
Hi, everyone. So we first talked about this at the September 16th Town Council meeting. This is an applicant-driven zoning text amendment request by Maine Golf. The ordinance amendment went through the planning board. It is primarily to reduce the minimum parking requirement established in section 514 of the zoning ordinance for both golf courses and golf driving ranges. So as we discussed through the application and the planning board meeting, our existing ordinance requirements for golf courses and driving ranges are fairly substantial and counterproductive to some of the town's goals that we've identified in the comp plan about protecting open spaces and natural areas in our more rural areas. So the applicant proposed a change, a reduction to the 2 lines in the minimum parking requirement table in the zoning ordinance. They're looking at some redevelopment, some of which has been done, some of which is coming up. Maine Golf is the only golf course operating in the town right now. And basically what they're looking to do, as they mentioned in the application, the existing parking requirement in the ordinance would require them to build something to the effect of 178 parking spaces in our rural zone, which is just an absurd amount of parking, an impervious area that would, then require the need for stormwater management, all for impervious areas that are probably not necessary in the first place. So the draft language that we're looking at reduces the minimum parking requirements per hole from, I believe, 8 spaces down to 2, and then 1.5 spaces per driving range tee down to 1. And then it kind of changes the way in which we would require parking for other types of buildings and spaces on the site. So things like clubhouses and event spaces, where there was this really strict requirement before of needing, 1 space for every 35 square feet of assembly area, and 1 space for every 200 square feet of floor area for, other commercial uses on the property. We utilize language that we have existing now in our commercial areas, where the applicant can basically propose what they need for parking based on an analysis. It could take examples from other golf courses or from traffic data. They would propose that to the project review board, and the project review board would review it and determine if it was adequate or not. So that's how the proposed language is shaped up. So we've gone through all the steps, and we're looking for the last step here with council vote. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Kyle? Councilor Pillsbury?
Has the applicant discussed what they'll do in the case of overflow parking? Because I know Old County Extension is not conducive to sort of side of the road parking. And I know that the facility can get kind of busy, and I'm just wondering what the contingency planning is.
Yep, so the applicant's here, but I also don't want to get into potential PRB site plan review territory, but that would all be part of the site plan review process. So if they were looking to expand the clubhouse in the future, as they've identified, the board would sort of weigh all that through their development review. And if there was a problem afterwards, then that would be a failure to meet their site plan review approval, because there would be a finding that you've proposed X amount of parking, and that parking is meant to adequately handle off-street parking. If all of a sudden there was an issue and parking wasn't being managed correctly, there would probably be a violation of the site plan somehow. So there would still be a recourse kind of if there was an impact like that afterwards.
Councilor Lawrence.
Is this just for the golf course, or is this for any rural area where we have?
No, it would be for all or any golf course land use in whatever district they're allowed in.
Okay.
So the districts that they're allowed in, the beginning of the memo, it's the RR1, or MDA, MDB districts, C1, C4, and R2 industrial districts. So,
but it's for golf
only for
courses
golf courses.
specifically
Yeah.
in any, okay.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, we will go ahead and open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak, they can move up to the podium. All right, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, Councilor Pilch, could you please read the be it ordained?
Sure. Be it ordained that proposed amendments to Chapter 21 Freeport zoning ordinance, Section 514, off-street parking and loading, introduced as an applicant-driven application from Maine Golf regarding parking requirements be adopted.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item 132-25. This is to set a public hearing to discuss amendments to Chapter 22 Design Review Ordinance. Kyle, you're up for this as well.
Yep, back. So we talked about this initially at a previous town council meeting. There's this idea that, we went through the exercise of increasing the maximum building height on Depot Street in the VC1 district to 55 feet. However, we identified that in the existing design review ordinance, it looks at things, certain design guidelines. Amongst them is building height, but the design review ordinance looks at building height more subjectively than the zoning ordinance, and the two criteria, height under zoning and height under design review, are both reviewed simultaneously when a project is in that area. So it's possible that a project can meet the zoning ordinance requirement for building height, but still be denied under the design review ordinance. So we came to council to identify this, to get direction to go to the planning board, to work on an amendment that would really get at protecting the intent of that previous ordinance amendment of allowing these taller buildings on Depot Street. So that's what we worked on. So attached in your materials, you should have the staff memo and red line ordinance amendment. We've just added to Section 8 design guidelines of the design review ordinance a subsection D that basically calls out a building height exception for any lot located on Depot Street in the VC1 district where no design guideline related to building height would be reviewed for those projects. Building height would exclusively be looked at through the lens of the zoning ordinance and whether or not it met that 55-foot maximum building height allowance. All of the other design guidelines, things like the roof shape, site features, the proportions, the open space to the building, the windows, the doors, all of that stuff would still apply. It would just be the building height for this specific area that wouldn't apply under design review. And the goal is that we would clear up a lot of the subjectivity in the design review update anyway, but as that's not quite done yet, that we would want this stopgap in place until we get to the point that the design review update is completed and adopted. So the planning board held its public hearing on October 1st, and they voted unanimously to recommend the ordinance amendment back to council.
Any questions or comments? I just want to thank staff for looking forward and seeing a potential conflict and getting ahead of it. That's incredible. Thank you for doing that.
Yep.
All right. Counselor Lawrence, could you please read the be it ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for October 21st, 2025 in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, starting at 6 p.m. to discuss the proposed text amendment to Chapter 22, Design Review Ordinance, Section 8, Design Guidelines regarding a building height exception for buildings subject to a design review certificate and located on lots with road frontage on Depot Street.
Second.
Any last discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item 133-25. So this is to consider action relative to setting a public hearing to discuss amendments to Chapter 46. As Sophie just mentioned, this came after we had set our original general assistance public hearing. This is more about process, and the last one was more about the appendices. So, anything you'd like to add?
I can quickly review the changes, or we can wait and do that next time. Up to you.
Why don't you review them now?
Okay. So this is the State of Maine Model Ordinance. The town of Freeport has long followed used the model ordinance that comes from the Department of Health and Human Services. It is not a requirement. However, if you wanted to deviate, we would need to make sure that your deviations aligned with state law. So all of the changes here are made to either align with changes in state law or to reflect best practices as identified by the Department of Health and Human Services. So for example, it's giving us some different guidance to allow us to assist with security deposits in very narrow circumstances. We haven't been able to do that. They're really digging into homelessness, people living in recovery, making it clear any non-U.S. citizen that could get assistance has to be lawfully here and pursuing their permanent citizenship in the way that they're supposed to be. It talks about a new requirement in Title 22 that requires that our GA administrator and those in the GA program are providing trauma-informed and culturally and linguistically appropriate services. We now have to be able to demonstrate that people who are in our GA program have this training within 120 days of appointment or election. One of the issues with this is it's a very specific training that DHHS has not yet created, but it's required. It talks about telephone applications and that emergency shelter residents can only be presumed eligible for 30 days now, so they're putting a limit on that. It does have a lot about work requirements and municipal workfare. We have this in our ordinance because it's the model ordinance. We have received, years ago, towns received legal guidance saying that those were not really good programs for municipalities to run. So I think you find municipalities perhaps with very robust general assistance social service that can run those, and maybe those who are not as concerned about the legal guidance that they've received. But we do not currently use that. And it talks about what a good faith effort is to use resources, how to deal with misspent income. I think the biggest piece is it clarified lien procedures for workman compensation, lump sum payments, Social Security retroactive payments and mortgage and capital improvement assistance. So they really are, I always hesitate to say housekeeping because some people will take umbrage with that, but it's housekeeping in the sense it aligns us with what the state would require in the ordinance.
Any questions for Sophie? All right, so this will be to set the public hearing for this. Councillor Pillsbury, could you please read the be it ordered?
Yep. Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for October 21st, 2025 in Town Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, Freeport, starting at 6 p.m. to discuss proposed amendments to Chapter 46 General Assistance Ordinance to ensure consistency with state of Maine law and regulatory requirements.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, moving on to item 134-25. So this is follow-up from previous conversations around our community support agency funding requests. This was brought to the Town Council Finance Committee. And Councillor Pillsbury, as the chair of the Finance Committee, could you please introduce this?
Sure. So we met on toward the end of September, and if you recall, we had allocated $57,250 in community support for applications for funding. We received requests from a lot of usual folks, and we received a couple new requests. So we went through and ultimately decided to allocate $55,500, and the difference was we did not support the capital reserve funding for Freeport Community Services, and we did include funding for the Freeport Wood Bank and Sweetser. So through a very lengthy and robust discussion, I mean, I think we talked about this overall, we were there for 3+ hours. So it was a lengthy discussion. We used the community support funding procedure that we had adopted last time, but we realized that there were some challenges in how we were approaching it, and we'd like to bring, so what you have in front of you is a motion to accept the funding as the committee's recommended, but we'd also like to point out that we'd like to have a discussion around how we're evaluating and how we're sort of moving these items at our October 21st meeting, so that we can just be open and transparent about how we're looking at this and ensure that the committee is acting on as directed by the council. Anything, Joanna or Dan, that you want to add from that? Okay.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, on this list, what are things that we have to pay for? In other words, services that we provide, that we're supposed to provide via the state requirement or something like that, that we need to provide and pay for versus?
So, specifically, none. However, you could easily make connections here that, for example, the free clinic, through these doors, the Elders Association, the Wood Bank, Sweetser, are all places that, with general assistance or alternative response, we would be taking on more responsibility because they are dealing with people that we ultimately would be responsible for, but we have these community partners that take those on. I think when you look at Freeport Community Services, we have been able to articulate reasons why we shouldn't spend lots of money on a generator for the library because of the warming, cooling center that is available at Freeport Community Services, the showers that are there for people who are homeless in the community that we otherwise might have to deal with. So, I mean, I can make those kind of arm's length. Could these things come back to us? Sure. I would say when you look at Meeting House Arts, you would see in the downtown vision, the council said they want certain things. We do not have the ability to put those things on as a municipality. When we look at the farmers market, I think we had people here talking about how they are accepting SNAP, which allows low-income folks to get fresh vegetables that they might not otherwise be able to get. When we talk about, they're not on this list, so it doesn't matter. So I guess my perspective here is there is nothing in this list that says you absolutely have to fund these. However, I think what the committee was looking at and what the guidelines said was, you wanted to make contributions that support the general community. Beyond that, it's up to council, and sure, some of these things would fall to us.
Okay. Did you guys think about funding the trails and how we're going to do that? Because I think that would fit with this also, and it's something that's coming up, and
Yeah, we increased the Conservation Commission's budget last year for that purpose, and also we gave money to Freeport Conservation Trust to do some of the trail work as well, so.
some of it, but not all of it. Okay, it's just something we need to work on. Okay.
And I will say what they have received is more than what we see here.
Yeah. And with community services, we're already renting space from them that we don't use, right? We have to pay for that, and we're gonna be paying to pave their parking lot at some point, per a contract that we have.
So I would just clarify, the town has 22 spaces down there. And I think that the agreement that we maintain the capital and the striping down there is part of that bigger contract, which I think is a 99-year lease. And I think we're partway through that. So I will tell you that in the background memo, Councilor Lawrence, there's some description of that, and the committee did discuss that during the meeting, the fact that there was the other $62,000 in support there.
And I will say too that, the process we've gone through certainly wasn't perfect, and the whole committee definitely agreed on that, but this was our effort to sort of balance our dedication to the community and providing services and also financial responsibility. This was part of that goal, was the process we just went on.
To belabor that just a second, we spent a lot of time talking about Freeport Community Services. That 99-year lease, or however long it is, the current bill for this year is $62,000, and that goes up every year with inflation. So that's an obligation. The stuff on this list is not an obligation. So
I get that.
Yeah, I know,
but
I know.
It's more money that's going to.
I'm making the same point you are.
Yeah.
One of the things we didn't want to do is turn off the spigot suddenly, or at least that was sort of my thinking in the discussion. So we did remove the contribution towards the capital reserves, but we also, and it says this in the memo, we wanted to set up a discussion with them about long-term funding, so that this doesn't just become something we do by rote every year, saying, yeah, check the box, we'll give them the same amount of money. But it is a discussion we want to have with them, for sure.
And I believe Sophie has already been working on scheduling that, so that is underway. Certainly not being ignored.
And I will just point out that these are applications that we've received. As part of the application process, each organization is to outline their impact and the service that they provide to the community and specifically Freeport residents. And I just want everyone to be mindful that we do see an incredible return on investment for the dollars spent here. It's sort of like when you give, you get the solicitation in the mail for Good Shepherd Food Bank. And it's like, if you donate $2, we can provide 4 meals. There's no way individually, if you had $2, you could go and provide 4 meals. But because of the scale and the size of their operation, they're able to do that. So these are dollars that if we spent them on our own, they would have far less impact and we'd still be spending more money to have to get to the same level of service that our community members are receiving from these organizations. So it's complicated for sure, but we're trying to hone in a process that feels right, that's transparent and open and defensible.
I would reiterate what Councilor Pillsbury just said in terms of the impact piece. I'd also just remark that we heard earlier this evening from FEDC about the importance of fit-up grants and how just a relatively small amount of money really does generate a lot more benefit, not only to that individual business owner, but to the whole Freeport economy and to the whole tax base as well. So I think the same can be said about how we're investing in these organizations in terms of what they're able to continue to do for the community for the benefit of Freeport residents.
Any other thoughts? So as Councilor Pillsbury said, we recognize, I'm not sure we want to spend another 3-hour meeting doing this next year. So that's a conversation for council that will be on other business during our next meeting. So this item is truly just to adopt the recommended contributions. Councilor Egan, could you please read the be it ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that the following community support agency funding request totaling $55,500 be approved.
You can just say as listed.
As listed on the agenda for this evening's meeting.
Second.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, moving on to item 135-25. This is a request from Meeting House Arts to extend the use of town property, the front of Town Hall, for the Pinky's art installation. Sophie wrote a memo about this and also will introduce the item.
So my introduction to the item is that back in August of last year, you approved a very robust proposal from Meeting House Arts to, I think, kick off our first public art installation, which is something that the Downtown Vision had desired. And in that proposal, it said that it would stay in front of Town Hall from October 1st through September 30th. Suzanne is going to want to get up and to speak anyway. On September 30th, I received a memo asking if they could extend the Pinky's stay for the reason of allowing seasonal lighting during the Sparkle celebration, for gallery and stage presentations featuring art made from reclaimed materials, youth art classes and public programming, continued collaboration with arts organizations, and a spring event that would actually mark the sculpture's departure. So it isn't just now you see it, now you don't. And they say that they can keep the insurance coverage. In conversations with staff, our understanding is that we can work around the Pinkies with the project that's happening out here. and that we didn't have any issue with sidewalk maintenance or anything like that in the winter season. So we are, from a staff perspective, we didn't have issues with it being there. Having said that, one of the things I love about Freeport is that the town council gets to decide who uses town-owned property. And so when Suzanne brought this up, I had a conversation with the council chair just to say, you're meeting in just a few days from this, could we just kick this to the council meeting and let you make a decision? Because I really don't want to. I think it's your choice, I think it's in your. So that's where we are, and Suzanne is here if she wants to speak more about the request, or if you had questions for her.
First of all, thank you very much for letting me to have this, let Meeting House Arts and the Pinkies have this opportunity. And Sophie, that was a very well done lead in to what it is I think we're trying to do tonight. We did intend for this to be a one-year public art, I call it experiment, to see how it really worked. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say, I don't know how many of you saw, how many people were around those Pinkies on this last weekend. It was mobbed. And the kids were having the best time, just all kinds of activities. And when they discovered that there were actually hidden treasures in the legs, it was, anyway, it was magical. And I think we have a declaration that the public art experiment works. And the hope that this sets the precedent. So the other thing is the opportunity for these to hold a place for the next public art exhibit that's to come down. And I've been in touch with Tempo Art as far as what they have as regular recycling through public art through the state. So we'll see what we can venture for the next replacement. But for now, the idea too is that this is just a logical extension of their stay, not only because we can continue to use them for our different events. We have a reclaimed Waste to Wonder exhibit that's coming in the gallery in another couple of weeks, which is all kinds of like old tire inner tubes made into art, as well as the blister packs that you get lettuce and stuff in from the grocery store, gigantic walls looking like glass with those types of blister packs. And then we have a fashion show with reclaimed material at Seidel House on the 17th. This is an advertisement. But anyway, I really think that the idea that the Pinkies have an opportunity for a permanent new home, which Posey is on the line, as I understand, and can address this. But there are negotiations now to move them to a more permanent home nearby. And this also allows a little more time for the artists to make the negotiations and the efforts needed to move them to their new forever home. So with that, I'll ask if your questions or anything I can add.
I will say I'm personally delighted by the Pinkies. I've been very surprised about how many people I've actually seen engage with them. Not even this past weekend, but when I'm just in town walking around, people seem to seek them out also. I think it's been a huge success. And I'm certainly happy personally to see them stay. I do remember in the original proposal there was, funds put aside or a plan for removal.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure, we have that ironclad for when it's time for them to go this time.
We're definitely looking at a spring departure. And again, Posey's on the line if anybody would like to ask either her or me any other questions.
And are the resources and materials, everything ready for that departure when it's time?
Yes, absolutely. I was assured of that just yesterday.
Any other questions, Councilor Egan?
I'm the last person to comment on sort of what's good public art or what should be public art, but I don't think I could have dreamed up at all something that would be as unique as the Pinkies. And I think from my recollection last year and paying attention to this, hearing a description about it before seeing them was sort of like, I'm really in favor of public art, but I'm having a hard time visualizing what this might be. And then seeing them arrive and hearing initial reactions, and I think it was about, days, not even a week, that they were here and that they were welcomed and loved and understood, and people were learning about them, and it was doing exactly what public art is supposed to do. Exactly what it's supposed to do. If it was, public art is an old-fashioned gold-framed, 16 by 32 portrait of some historic Freeport boat builder from 300 years ago. That's public art. It would not have gotten the attraction that the crowd that showed up here over the weekend, that were all over the Pinkies. So I'm extremely pleased and for the learning lesson that I got in what public art can do and should do. It's great.
Just to echo what Councilor Egan just said, my sister does not return to Freeport very often, but this spring I was driving her down Main Street and our conversation stopped dead the moment that she saw the Pinkies. Now, I cannot repeat what she actually said when she saw them, but I said, that is exactly the point of that level of attention that you are not expecting when you drive down Main Street in Freeport, something that is different perhaps than the last time you came, that is another reason to come, another reason to engage, another reason to be in a different part of Main Street than you might otherwise be drawn to. And I think they've done exactly what you suggested, and the programming that you've offered along with it, not just here on site, but at other places around town. So I understand from the memo there are plans to continue that, and I think you're doing exactly what you said you were going to do. So I am pleased that that will continue.
You don't trust Tom to beep you out?
See how good that is.
We need our 5-second delay, I guess. Any other thoughts? Okay. I just would like to, again, I think I'm just repeating myself, but I've been very surprised. I was in favor of them, and it was still, my expectations were exceeded, so.
Well, I do want to give some credit to Earl as well. Earl.
Thank you, Earl.
I have a recording of them being delivered on a flatbed truck, and Earl, they're very, well managing their positioning and finding their place where they are now.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts or feelings?
I think,
we're required to take public comment.
yeah.
Mary, do you want to say a few words? Go on up.
I just want to thank her for the courageousness of doing that, because you're right, when she brought it in, we're all like, I don't know. And to have this as our first public art, wow, what a win. So thank you. You were courageous, girlfriend.
And I do look forward to hearing what their permanent home is. I'll be sure to go say hi when they're there. Okay, I can read the be it ordered. Be it ordered that the request from Meeting House Arts to extend the installation of the Pinkies art installation on town-owned property located in front of Town Hall at 30 Main Street be approved through April 30th, 2026.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that was unanimous. Thank you very much, Suzanne. Okay, and I'm really excited for the Christmas lights to go back on. Those were gorgeous, yes. Moving on to item 136-25. This is to basically amend our town council meeting schedule this coming November. So while we were meeting with staff, leadership and staff, Councilor Smith was reviewing our charter, and we realized that we are supposed to hold our sort of a after-election meeting within 8 days of the election. And that is not November 18th. We have to move it. So because there's also some business we need to get through in November, we thought it might make sense to make the November 18th meeting a regular town council meeting. Any questions?
Unfortunately, I won't be here on the 6th. I'm out of town for work, but
Okay.
I don't think I'll have much to do at that meeting.
Oh, I know.
Just to clarify, too, part of this schedule change is related to the holiday. We would normally have met the Tuesday right after the
Correct, yeah.
election, which is Veterans Day. So we had planned to do it on the 18th and then realized that that was too late, according to the charter.
Great. Any thoughts or questions other than John? Is that your only conflict? You're here the 21st and our next council meeting?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Beginning to end.
Huh?
From beginning to end.
Yes, beginning to end. All right, well, in that case, Councillor Smith, could you please read the be ordered?
Be it ordered that the town council schedule be amended to add November 6th, 2025 at 6:30 PM as the town council organizational meeting. The November 18th, 2025 meeting will be amended to become a regular town council meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Lawrence, that was a aye?
Yeah. Lawrence, that was an
And that's 6:30, that's accurate?
That's
Yes.
because there's a committee meeting right before that, so rather than trying to reschedule the committee meeting, we're just going to move it to 6:30.
And as we know, that meeting tends to be fairly short and celebratory, so. The November 18th meeting will be regular time at 6. Okay, moving on to our next item, item 137-25. This is to consider action relative to a request to use town property from our power. Chris Wolf, I have you on this one.
So I don't really have much context to add to this request, except for they are having a little bit of difficulty securing insurance. So we put the order contingent on receipt of insurance.
I'm chewing my sneaky snack. Any questions or thoughts?
I have a question, sort of a pedantic one. I don't have a dog in this fight about this particular issue, but are we allowed to decide who gets to use town property for which kinds of issues? So, in other words, if we say, yes, you can use it for your rally, do we have to say yes to anybody else who wants to have a rally, no matter if we agree with the position that they're taking or not?
within reason, I think.
This is one of the topics I despise because
Welcome.
while I thoroughly enjoy the privilege that the First Amendment gives us, where it intersects with government speech can be a very tricky piece. If you were to say, for example, we say you only use town council chambers, we will only allow people to use town council chambers for activity that is directly related to municipal government, the town of Freeport. When you go to the library, we say anybody who wants the room can have the room as long as they abide by the behavior guidelines in the room. Freeport has had the history of allowing the use of town-owned property pretty much as long as they have they can meet the criteria. So if it's for a rally that we expect to bring more than 250 people, they have to go through the large gathering event process. But you really cannot pick and choose based on the content of the message. So if you thought about your most abhorrent topic and somebody wanted to come have a rally, as long as it wasn't hate speech and inciting violence, which are kind of the places, the way I have been taught, we would pretty much have to let them do that.
So following that through, we could say, no, you don't have insurance, therefore you can't use the park. But we can't say, no, you can't use the park because of what you're going to say. So other than checking the boxes for the things like insurance and whatever other permit application requirements we have, what's our role?
So your role would be, the town council could say, we're not going to allow gatherings like this in the park. You have a choice. You know, it's kind of, I don't know if you saw a while ago, the town of Bucksport got into trouble because they allowed they had certain types of religious holiday decorations that they allowed people to put up on town-owned property. And somebody came along and put something up that they really didn't like. The problem is you can't pick and choose between the two of them. And so, I mean, I think it's delicate. I think if you wanted to manage that, we should have a policy that manages it. So you as a governmental organization have the right to what's known as government speech. So you can put some parameters, but it has to be you selecting it. The way it's managed right now, it's kind of, you can apply and we'll decide. And if you're saying that, your decision really can't be on the topic unless you've clarified that in advance. So you can change this process, and I would have to do some research into where those lines are, but I could do that for you.
Might be a fun topic to discuss.
I think yeah.
And I think, it's a good idea to do that research before we feel like we have to.
Yeah.
So kind of have a good understanding of what we can and cannot do.
Chris might have the answer to this, but I'm guessing this is not the first application we've had for something that might be deemed political use of municipal.
I don't remember
Space.
having other political rallies, though, since I've been here. Not in the park, not where they've rented used town property.
It's interesting because there have been political rallies at other parts of town, including sort of in the town square proper, which is, I don't know what that process was. That was sort of partially on private property and partially on public property. I would say sort of in the right of way. But given that we don't have a town green, town square where you could really solidly have a gathering, I think Memorial Park is the closest to that. I would certainly not be in favor of trying to preempt the right to free assembly and free speech. My only concern would be that if this is the place where it's going to be, it would obviously, we would have to be consistent in terms of allowing that. It is the closest thing we have to a town green. It is also a memorial park. And I don't know how residents feel about that becoming a political center.
So one option that you would have, I'm not saying it's the only one, would be to put some caveats on this to say essentially you're concerned about the fact that this is more political, that we haven't allowed this in the past, and ask essentially to say if we can reasonably deny it, which I can find out, because this didn't come up to me before today, at this moment, I did not have the opportunity or think that I needed to reach out to the town attorney, but I could do that. So, one option would be to condition this upon finding from the town attorney that we have to do it, but you could deny it if you didn't want political stuff to happen there. We could check with the town attorney. That's an option. I don't know, where we don't have a policy, I think it gets kind of murky.
Is there any concern if we vote for this, we allow this, that sets precedent to allow it in the future if we were to adopt a policy?
Only for the next 2 months.
So I think if you condition it, if you, even if ultimately we have to say yes, you condition it in your approval, then it kind of knocks the wind out of the sails if we can create a policy later. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about in the collective bargaining world where I say, I will do this thing, but it's non-precedent setting and it I mean, that's,
It's not precedent setting anyway, because we have a new council here in 2 months. I mean, 3 months, it is, it's new, right? New people.
But we also, I think you could say, I think what you're suggesting is we could say pending policy review, we're conditionally approving this.
The event,
Also conditional on insurance.
yeah.
I will say the event is next week.
Right.
Yeah, it's in 7 days.
I can get that answer tomorrow. Caroline and I have an in. We can make that happen.
But is this really political? Seems like it's more about rates than it is.
Yeah, I think it's more of the, like I said, and I think this is where Dan was coming from too, that I don't know that we have any particular concern about this particular item. It really is this the beginning of that space being used for sort of political activity?
The answer yes or no doesn't matter. What matters most is making sure we know what we can and cannot do as a council. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and plan to add this to other business, whether we can fit it on the 21st or the 18th.
Okay. Sounds good.
I don't know if it makes any difference, but I guess everybody else was aware of this before, but I'm just realizing that the purpose of this day and this time of this event is to coincide with the PUC meeting and happening in the hotel right next door, which I think does make it political. I'm also curious that on October 14th, it's going to be pretty dark after 5:30, so not sure how much of this is actually even going to be visible, but.
Yeah, I think their event is 5 to 6, just 1 hour. They buffered in a little setup time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm following everybody else up here. I don't think we want to be in a place of trying to decide what is or is not considered political speech and then try and figure out how to curtail some of that. I agree with what Sophie said, unless it's inciting violence or hate speech. I'm pretty sure it's allowed.
So two things. One is that I would like to follow up and start talking about a policy and kind of rethink things. But on the other hand, after all the discussion, I've been to events that you would consider political in other towns, on their town squares and in their town parks. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity to do that. And I look forward to what Freeport residents would have to say, and I respect the fact that it's not really our billboard to say, this is what we want, this is what we don't want. We have one of those in front of the public safety building, and it occasionally works. But the town square belongs to the town, and sometimes we might not like how it's used, and we can certainly put conditions on it, which I think we're right to do, and we should revisit. But yeah, I don't have particular strong feelings about this particular event, but I don't want to give the impression that I want to quash all, public speaking on public grounds, because I think it's entirely appropriate.
I think from a process standpoint, having a policy that says one thing or another is what ultimately will protect the town and also make it clear to residents what the council is supporting or not.
Right, and I think when I was saying what we can and cannot do, I think it's just in reference of it being a thin, important line of what we can define and what we can't. Yeah.
Totally agree.
All right. So are we able to read the be it ordered as it stands? To get what you need.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you did it this way, it would go through. If you want me to get legal advice, if you have concerns about, what I heard, and I want to just say, I'm not trying to recap all of council, but what I think I just heard is that I'm not hearing like a hue and cry that this is horrible, but just a concern that we don't necessarily have a policy. If that's where we are, then doing it this way is fine. If you're concerned about this particular event, I would condition it. But if the answer is we want to dive into this, come up with parameters, I think you'd be okay with it the way it's written.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, Councilor Brown.
Be it ordered the use of town property request from Our Power for use of Memorial Park on Tuesday, October 14th, 2025, from 4 to 6:30 p.m. for a rally to oppose CMP rate hike proposal, Fight the Hike, be approved pending receipt of required insurance coverage.
Second.
Any other thoughts? All in favor? All right, so now we are moving on to public comment period part 2 for folks who are virtual.
I don't see any hands up.
Okay. All right, we will move on. Okay, so we're moving on to our other business portion of the agenda. Our first item is the FY26 contract with FEDC. Upon reviewing the contract, it basically went up to the end of last fiscal year, so it's time to revisit it. And I'm curious on getting thoughts from council on any ways to adjust it. I know, Sophie, you had a conversation with Mary Davis, if you want to add some thoughts to that as well.
So, last fall, we worked through, I think very carefully, worked through what the new role for FEDC and the town would be after we created the development director position here at the town. And we are seeing, I think, incredible success with that. We're not seeing people stepping on each other's toes, which I think that was an issue we were concerned we'd be duplicating in some areas and missing others. The lanes, I'm going to use Mary Davis's own words, the swim lanes are very clearly defined, and I'm really happy to see a level of collaboration happening that really allows us to take a very small contribution towards or allocation for economic development and just boost it. We are seeing Brett and his team be able to focus the way council had initially envisioned that, with a real attention to planning and codes and trying to find barriers and fixing things. And we are seeing a level of assistance and marketing that we just would not be able to provide as a municipality. So it's coming together really well, and I'm seeing a link with the business community. I think there is a synergy that has happened having Tawny as contracted support for FEDC and an employee at the chamber, that when I have questions or concerns, I really am speaking to the business community on various levels. And I think it's working very well for a lot less than I would be able to provide that service, and I think better than I could provide that service with a municipal lens. So the suggestion at this point was talking with Mary and Brett, really feeling like the scope of work we outlined last year was more about a process and an ongoing activity, as opposed to we'll get this done and then go to the next thing. It really is about here's how we're going to orient ourselves. And it seems to be working really well.
Councilor Egan.
Is the memo that was included in our packet the proposed contract for?
So the
upcoming?
the proposal is to change the dates and re-sign.
Okay. I was going to ask, change the dates.
And in addition to that, we had a work plan that we brought to you last year that kind of outlined what you would get for the allocation that you were giving. And we're proposing that that work plan be unchanged, because we think that's working well.
and if there's anything that the council would like to see from us, because we also agreed to a monthly update for the council. If there's any changes in what you'd like to see us bring in that monthly update, we're absolutely open to that. We have very good participation from the council on our board meetings and are just happy to bring whatever we can that helps, so.
I think you, in your presentation earlier, and when we spoke, it's almost focusing on the vacancy rate. This is good news. So retention and how we can work on that as much as possible. As you mentioned, there's turnover that's just inherent to
Correct.
retail operations, but trying to stay ahead of that as much as possible, I think will probably be more of a focus moving forward.
Right. And, the voice of what is lacking or missing, I think as John and I talked about, oh my goodness, quite a while ago, he said, I think that the voice that FEDC can bring is the independent voice of what we see working well or not working well. And so I think it's given us an opportunity to continue to bring that with the businesses' voices behind us. So I think that's a value that is really added. And I think it's helped both Brett and FEDC working together on priorities and such things. So, yep.
So this is a really strained analogy, guaranteed to induce a groan, but about 18 months ago, the tuning knob was off, and there was a lot of static, and we didn't know what the right frequency was.
I know.
And now this station is coming in perfectly.
That was the most John analogy I've ever heard.
It was a John. I hope you don't expect me to sing with a guitar. I'm not good.
And I also, I do want to take a minute to sort of applaud everyone involved and kind of working through the tough parts of the re-sorting out
That's
what
right.
was the relationship.
Change is messy in the middle.
And here we are, and it's really been.
That's right.
Yeah.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
So I have a couple of concerns that I think we can, I just need some more information, and I think maybe some more perspective from Sophie, because it's really not about the work that FEDC does. It's really about the budget implications. And we're hearing a lot of concern from residents about increase in staff and how that relates to increase in taxes.
Okay.
And back when it was very staticky, part of how this transition was presented was that part of bringing more economic development in-house was going to be essentially a wash. And I think if we are continuing to make this investment in economic development on two fronts, I just think we need to be clear that that is an investment, that we are spending more money on economic development than we maybe had originally planned to in those early conversations. And I just want to acknowledge that this is an investment. It's also exceeds the entire amount that we just had or the Finance Committee just had that 3-hour conversation about going to multiple different agencies throughout the community. So I guess part of my concern is this already budgeted? Part of the concern is originally part of the shift also had to do with the TIF. And I know we're still trying to realign the TIF, but is it possible that going forward, this contribution will continue to come out of that?
So, great question.
Great segue.
So this is funding our development director, and FEDC is more out of the TIF. When we talk about the TIF, which we're going to do coming up.
Nope, not next.
Next after next. We are, that's one of we have carved out up to 25% of the TIF to be used for affordable housing and transit-oriented development. So of that 25%, up to 15% can be used for debt on a public safety building, if that's something you wanted to use. Don't have to, but we want to put it in there so you have a choice. The rest of that can be used for general economic development. So what is that? That would be our Director of Development. It would be FEDC, fit-up grants, marketing, things of that nature. When we look at the TIF, we will actually have more money flowing into the TIF. When you look at that 25%, we should be in good shape to, I'm just double checking with my numbers person, to continue the funding of all of those things with a 75-25 split, which is the statutory split. You could do more you could make the 75-80 if you wanted and do 80-20. But the 75-25 split gives us the most flexibility within the TIF. So currently, I think our economic development director, we're paying benefits out of the general fund, and everything else comes out of the TIF.
And this would continue to be the same
Yep.
here?
Yep.
Okay.
So I have some of the same thoughts. I love how the collaboration worked out, better than I expected, honestly. And I love the work that FEDC is doing. I love the work that Brett is doing. It's better than I thought, so that's different. It's also different because from a budget perspective, it's not what I was expecting. I thought it was a wash. I think bringing it in-house is more expensive than I thought it was going to be. And funding both streams is more than I thought we were signing up for. I'm less concerned about where the money's coming from because we have plenty of things we could spend money on and other things we could not spend money on. So anyway, I share those concerns. And I guess my question is $60,000 the right number? Should it be 40? Should it be 80? Should it be 0? Should it be 100? Yeah, so I don't know if we have thoughts on how we arrived at that or if we should continue with that each year or adjust it.
So we arrived at that by a conversation that council had where they kind of set aside a certain amount of money. And my understanding is that then FEDC said, this is what we can do with that amount of funding.
Right.
So much like the community support conversation that we had before, I think FEDC has built its current budget, fiscal year budget, and expectations and responsibilities around that 60,000. So that is kind of, I think, how that got built last year.
That's
and
correct.
just carried forward.
That's correct. It was based on a contract individual to be able to do the work. We clearly said as an FED organization that our volunteer organization would not be able to provide the kind of servicing that we are now, and that we would need a contract person to be able to do that. And we believe that we have been very careful with funds and that we are very frugal with our funds, and we are very careful that the face of what FEDC doing is bringing huge value to the town and not wasteful of funds, because we are almost all taxpayers as well, so.
Yeah, and I will say the way to kind of think through, like, of course you plan your budget before now.
Absolutely, right.
So that's a conversation that we could have earlier, part of our budget process, to make sure
Right.
that's aligning more effectively. And I'm also, I definitely hear these concerns from Councilor Smith and Councilor Pilch, and I'm certainly, I am very aware of the delegate nature of the success we're seeing with the economic side of our town, and would be wary to do much to rock that boat at this current moment.
I would just say, I think that given exactly what we talked about this delicate balance and the fragility of some of the success that we're seeing and the need to continue the work, I'm generally in favor of this. I guess my caution in terms of what Councilor Pilch and Chair Benoit just said is that my understanding was that was a one-year scope of work that was going to be evaluated at some point, probably earlier than now. And I think what we don't want to set, in the same way that we've had this conversation with a number of other organizations, the expectation that that's just always continuing, instead of saying, do we need to accelerate something by putting more money in, or do we feel like we need to put that money somewhere else? So I guess I would just echo what you just said, which is to think about that before the contract expires.
Yeah, there's this concept of Parkinson's law, where the amount of work you have expands to meet the time available you have to do it. So I wonder is if we offer $60,000 as a contribution, do we then set a budget that says, oh, okay, we have $60,000 to spend, here's how we'll spend it, as opposed to the other way around, saying here's minimum budget, here's viable budget, and here's wish list budget, and we have a more meaningful conversation rather than just, yep, same as last year, keep on doing what we're doing, which has been fabulous. So I'm trying to separate the opinion of the work that I think is being done from the budget constraints. And I think the work that's being done is fantastic. I love the work that you and Tony and everybody else is doing. And I'm just trying to be mindful of the budget.
Right, and I think from an FEDC, one of the things to be mindful of is the continuity of this type of work is extremely important. Building relationships like this does not take months, it takes years. And if, in fact, our funding is at risk every year, it will put FEDC in a very different place of how we have to think about the kinds of services that we can produce. So we have, my board has pretty clearly said there's a lot of organizations that go to our community and ask for support. The Chamber does, the Visit Freeport does, there are many, and we did not want to be another organization that was going to the same pockets, asking them for funds and monies. So again, these are the discussions that we had before we set the monies, a year and a half ago or so ago. So I think if we are to enter in a different kind of agreement about how we go forward, it will just bring up a set of discussions about how we go about that. Yep.
Ultimately, the town council, this is a council decision about
Absolutely.
how it wants to expend its funds.
Yep.
I would say that when we think about how to assist the budget, with the impact of the budget on the mill rate, we talk about wanting to grow the community. That takes, I think, a little bit of an investment. And I think it is important, for a larger discussion off cycle for that. And our very wise assistant town manager has, if you tip 2 steps back to just look holistically about how we contribute to outside groups, all of them, and not have it be about social service and not have it be about arts and not have it be about FEDC, and created a framework that was sustainable moving forward, then people wouldn't be in this place of kind of, do I have to beg for dinner this week or next week? And so I think it would be great if with the Finance Committee, we just take a few minutes to talk about what does that other business item look like, so that we could truly have the discussion about what is the town's role in assisting or supporting other entities. And is it a bullseye approach where, like, here are our collaborative partners that here's what we expect, and here are other, like, what is it gonna look like so people can expect that?
Right.
This is for the next budget year we're talking about, right? Like,
Yes.
the year we're in is already funded and.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's part of with community support, you clearly pulled it out and said, we're gonna make those decisions. This one, when we talked about it in the budget year, it it was a brief conversation, I was surprised how short it was, about FEDC. And so I, you
For
know.
FY '25.
For FY,
current,
yeah,
yeah.
for FY '26.
Right.
The one,
26.
For this
the
year.
one that we're in
I'm
right now.
behind.
We're getting old. So I just wonder if it would make sense to have a little bit more conversation at the Finance Committee about how to kind of facilitate a broader conversation that with some notice that community members can participate in.
Sure.
I do think we got a bigger bang for the buck with you right now. I've seen it, you know, I've been part of this town for 23 years now. Wow. I've seen more work done in the last 3 years with the FEDC than I've seen in the past. When I was even owned a business downtown, I never saw what they were doing. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
I support this. I mean, for a
you.
while, I was like, FEDC, what the heck do they do?
Right,
We're
that's
spending
right.
this money and we're not really getting anything.
Right.
But I think with the change, with Brett being on board this way, I think it works really well.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm for this, and I do think we do need to talk about it, but we need to talk about all of it, because we have other people,
Right.
well, Freeport Community Services, every year, they come with the same, you know, it's like a line item on the budget, but it's not. Same with Meeting House Arts. And I don't know if that was part of the whole operation to be part of it, but when they first came to get the first $120,000, it was, we're not coming back every year. And, well, that hasn't happened. It's been every year that the Meeting House has been back. So, anyway, we need to talk more about it. And I think the way we need to fund, one of the thoughts I thought we were funding the community service type stuff was after we finished at the end of the year, whatever we had left over, we put some into the capital budget and we fund it. That way we're not raising taxes to give money away. You know, I'd rather give it to you because you're really making an impact, at least for the business community. So you are too, but I'm just saying it's different. You're a nonprofit. Anyway.
Sure, and,
That's,
you know, we have seen lots of ways that economic development is measured, and it's measured by, you know, producible income for the town, because of course that's our goal. Our goal is that we're producing higher revenue through real estate taxes and property and sales taxes and such to the town. So there are ways that, you know, Brett and I have seen it, that economic development groups try to report on progress and outcomes at all. It's not direct, you know, or do it by activity metrics, which we're doing through things like vacancy rates and that sort of thing. So, you know, I understand that this is, you know, it is never easy to budget for these sorts of things, and we want to be providing value, so.
And I will say, you know, if we go through that process, you know, your bullseye mentality here, I think that's a good idea. And we can always look at multi-year contracts, not 99-year leases. Probably not that.
Right.
But, you know, if we have a good thing going, can we do a 3-year lease?
Right.
Or, not lease.
Right, because it also does.
Contract.
Right, it also can give us the ability to, instead of doing contract, to do an employee for a period of time. Right now, I'm unable to do that. I will not do that because I can't offer someone employment and then term it, whereas a contract, I can.
And I think it's just one of those things where it's, you know, how you're saying, am I going to have to beg for my dinner tomorrow night? It's just not a productive position to put some key community partners into, so.
Thank you.
And I think the point some of us are getting to too is very much, as you just said, Mary, the same can be true for all of these organizations.
Absolutely.
Everyone's trying to figure out their budget, and well in advance of when we make decisions here. But I think part of what's becoming confusing to me is that we seem to be making these conversations throughout the year.
Yeah.
And I know we're still trying to get to that point of alignment, but it seems like we spend so much time at budget time, but then there are still these things that are trailing. So trying to figure out how we can keep that aligned is, I think, an ongoing challenge.
That's above my pay grade.
Yeah, and I think that is, I think that's an implicit goal of the Finance Committee as well. I say that from my understanding of my co-committee members, and I think based on what I'm hearing tonight, we'll add that to our list of things to discuss.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
if we're discussing this now instead of on June 29th, right, it allows us to have a deeper conversation about what we want to do for next year's budget, same with the community stuff. So otherwise, June and May become very, very busy months, and we don't have the time to have the discussion. So I almost like having the longer discussions and figuring out our values throughout the year, and then budget should be pretty easy. It's kind of, what we said.
Yeah.
throughout.
And we can talk about what it makes sense for timing of those conversations, for sure. Thank you, Mary.
So can I just clarify? I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but what I think I'm hearing is that I'm all set to update this MOU, and that we'll have a larger conversation with the Finance Committee. I will work with Caroline and Jessica to set up some good supporting documents for you to be able to jump into that in October, November. I'm going to say November because I really am going on vacation.
Any other thoughts? Did Sophie capture everyone's understanding? Okay, moving on to item number 2, which is the paid parking facility moratorium follow-up.
And I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion, as I have from all conversations and discussions with council about paid parking, since I am employed by one of the 2 nonprofits that has implemented paid parking downtown.
Take it away.
All right, so Kyle Drexler, town planner. So I drafted a memo that was included following the moratorium adoption. We talked about it at that meeting, that we would come back with some policy options, basically a spectrum of the different ways that you could go in this discussion. And that before anything went to the planning board for a potential zoning amendment, that staff and the planning board would benefit and really need direction from the council as far as, what policy option they're looking at on this topic. So just to kind of clarify up front, a few things, this memo and kind of what I've prepared doesn't go into is the idea of on-street parking. This is specifically off-street parking as it's regulated in the zoning ordinance. So zoning ordinance, land use regulation, we don't cover off-street parking at all. And that also any kind of additional, what was that? Saying the zoning ordinance doesn't cover on-street parking. Okay, sorry if I said off-street. And then this also wouldn't touch on any kind of separate conversations related to, any nonprofit organizations and other strategies the town might have for working with that. So that being said, I tried to outline a few different options here. We had some public comment on it earlier. One being just a flat out, prohibition on paid parking facilities. Obviously, this from kind of a draft standpoint, this would probably be one of the more simple, quick options as far as getting a policy, established in the ordinance, because it would probably just take a single standard to really clarify that, maybe a kind of secondary adjustment to the definition. But kind of beyond the technical aspect of the ordinance change itself, broke down some, the pros and cons really laid out here are the same for each one. It's just kind of inverse, whether you're talking about not allowing paid parking or allowing it. The zoning ordinance currently incentivizes a shared parking model through less strict minimum parking requirements. So I think it's important to note that the town's current model, downtown at least, is to incentivize this idea of shared parking. The benefits of not allowing paid parking facilities is that you're not incentivizing the conversion of shared free parking to non-shared, potentially paid parking as much. So you could have less conversion of that existing shared parking pool than you would if you allowed paid parking. The con to not allowing paid parking is obviously it's not as flexible for property owners. And parking comes with things like maintenance costs and construction costs and all of that. So you're removing one of those revenue streams potentially. Option 2 is, I'm going to skip over option 3 for the most part because I think that's probably the least likely. Option 2 is to allow paid parking facilities with some standards or restrictions. So again, I won't go into the pros and cons because they're pretty much the opposite of what I just said for no paid parking. But I did want to outline some potential operational and design standards in that section that, if council was interested in looking at any type of paid parking downtown, those are potentially some standards that we could include or talk about in the zoning ordinance to regulate it. In this section, I kind of also highlighted a couple different ideas that should be talked about if paid parking at all is desired. One, there's the idea of parking that's used to meet a minimum parking requirement versus parking as a parking lot as kind of a standalone land use, as just its own sort of business. So potentially differentiating between those two different uses, parking as like a principal use and parking as an accessory use. And then the idea that we have certain areas downtown or the potential for even more areas downtown where from the outside, it looks like a single parking lot, but it could fall within multiple different lots or property owners. And, if you were interested in paid parking, how would you want to regulate those situations? So I'll stop there. If anyone has specific questions on anything in the memo, I'm happy to answer, but really we're looking to get council feedback on general direction going forward.
I'll start and just, I think, remind myself and maybe others that we've had a couple of public workshops about this. Maybe we could have some more. And there was a pretty uniform flavor to all of the public comment, which was against paid parking or why would we ever consider it. I appreciate very much the opportunity here to consider from staff's hard work to create options. Councilors always like to have choices.
No recommendations, by the way, just purely options laid out.
And I guess I go back to, in general, I would generally say moratoriums are probably not a good idea, but in this case, I absolutely supported the moratorium. And consequently, just having a flat out, there should never be paid parking, period, makes a lot of sense to me given on what we've heard, but there's this tiny little voice in the back of my head, but what does the future look like? And we had this conversation this morning at FEDC, and several people on that group commented that you can always undo things, just like we have done right here. So the complexity of the options that are outlined are probably only a fraction of what could possibly be invented if you were to let 7 of us up here go to work on this stuff in terms of how it might be construed over here only on Tuesdays and this way if you're facing the sun. And I recall back to when, well, a few years ago, more than a few years ago, more than 10 years ago, when a surface parking space was the highest and best use of downtown land. And I think we have clear evidence, hopefully lots of momentum, and certainly opportunities that are shifting that focus to where the highest and best use of immediate downtown land is not necessarily a parking spot. And that's not to say we don't need parking. Of course we need parking, but that should not be at the top of the Christmas tree as the highest and best use. So while I'm hesitant to just blanket say, no, we shouldn't have paid parking and go with option one, the hesitancy is because I just think about what if we want to do something later, or what if there's another garage, et cetera. But I think for now, this is a long way of saying the complexity that we're going to intentionally create by trying to think that we can come in now, not as traffic engineers, not as mostly as retail professionals, and turn the knobs to say, we think we want this here and a little bit here and only of this and maybe it's shared, maybe it's not. I think we're almost guaranteed to make it worse. So I generally don't like sledgehammers for thumbtacks, but I think in this case, I'm in favor of option one.
Just real quick to hop on what you said about changing it, and yeah, there's nothing stopping, if you went with option one, there would be nothing stopping you from immediately making an amendment, a week later, a month later, or whenever, to change it. It would, probably be an inefficient use of staff and council time to bounce back and forth with amendments like that. But there's no reason if you have, new data or a new, set of conditions or, environment downtown that you can't just revisit the issue and, update the policy in the future.
Second, well, I shouldn't say secondary. In addition to my convoluted thinking that I just described, or maybe even more important, is the value that's in here very discreetly pointed out, which is that the planning board and our staff need clear direction, that our job is to set the policy, our job is to be clear with that, and any sort of digestion of what is in option two for how we might describe this is going to, in my opinion, create more ambiguity and potentially more confusion and lead to more sort of one side and another side than we already have. So I think our role, going back to that, our role should be to give that clear direction and be as clear and concise to both the planning board and to staff, particularly the staff who have to do the work.
One, I think we do need to have more discussion, discover what is it that we've had one workshop where we discuss what we need to do as a town, but I think we need to get more people involved to decide what we want to do. Also, free parking is not free parking. Someone's paying for it, and what we're talking about here is changing from building owners and building users paying for parking and having people that come to town pay for parking. I don't like paying for parking. I don't think a lot of people like paying for parking. However, we are also talking about people who own specific lots and they own their own lot, and now we're telling them what they can do with that lot. And I have a hard time telling someone that owns a private lot whether they can do whatever. We have made it complex because we've forced people, not forced, but we asked people to be part of a shared parking system where we have lots that everybody shares parking lot, or parking lot, so it makes it harder to delineate. So that is a complex part that we'd have to solve if we did go to a paid or semi-paid or something like that. So I'm not opposed to any option, but I think we need to get more of the town involved before we make a decision. I don't have a problem making a decision, but I want to make the right one, and I don't want to make it more complex than it already is. But I think you're right. No matter what we do, it's going to be more complex.
Go ahead, Councilor Pilch.
So Chip's right, parking's not free. Somebody's always paying for it. The difference with paid parking, right, paid parking by visitors, is that we're adding an additional cost to maintaining that space. So if it costs $1 per hour to pay property tax and pave and stripe and maintain and sweep and plow a space, then anybody who's doing paid parking is not going to charge $1 for that space. They're going to charge more than that. So paid parking is always going to be more expensive overall for all of the people involved than not paid parking. It changes who pays the bill, right?
Yeah.
Right, it changes from the property owner to the visitor.
But you still have the same costs. You still have to stripe the lot, you still have to
Right, but
maintain it.
if I'm offering paid parking, why would I want to do it at a break-even price? Like, I would want to make a profit. But the second part of that is it shifts who pays it, and by shifting the burden to the visitor, it dissuades people from visiting.
Yeah.
And once they're here, it dissuades them from staying here. Let me go in and get my boots and then get back in my car and leave. I would love for people to come in, get their boots, and then say, oh, what a cute little coffee shop, what a great little museum, let me go investigate. So there's that on the economics. I think I'm glad to see not a lot of support for option 3 to essentially do nothing, because I feel like there's a lot of issues with that. I agree with John in that I think we need to set direction. I think we need to set policy. I think uncertainty is awful for everybody, for visitors, for business owners, for nonprofits. Like, uncertainty is not a great option for us. I like the fact that where we land doesn't have to be a permanent forever solution. I think right now, where we are as a town, I think it's safe to say, if I can speak on behalf of the town, which I can't really do, I don't think we want to incentivize parking lots as the way we want to grow our town. So if we said, all right, let's decide what we want downtown, I don't think parking lots would be at the top of the list. I think there's 100 other things I put up there first, housing being pretty close to the top. So I think just from that philosophical point of view, and all the other things that support it, I'm in favor of option 1, being clear about it, because I think that's where we are as a town right now.
I also sort of agree with what Councilor Egan was saying with, I don't want to say it's forever, so I also appreciate we could revisit this at any given time. Sort of like the environmentalist side of me is thinking about how free parking encourages people to drive, right? And we're trying to create a downtown that people are walking to and biking to and taking buses to. So trying to incentivize other ways of travel, and free parking makes getting into the car the easiest one. But on the other side, we don't have that infrastructure there yet. It's not necessarily safe to walk to town or bike to town. So it's, I see the long-term strategy to maybe not have free parking to encourage other ways of travel, but we're certainly not there yet. And I think we have other ways we're approaching that. I think with the TIF, if we leave parking out of it and parking stays free, we have other levers with the TIF that will encourage the right kind of development we want. So all that to say is, I think paid parking could make sense in the future, but our ecosystem downtown is far too fragile right now for me to feel like it's worth the risk of implementing it.
So are you leading option 1? I want to put you on the spot, but I'm
I forget
guessing
which
that
I forget which one's which.
option 1 is a ban on paid parking.
Yeah. I mean, it almost seems like it's too easy. Like, what are we missing? And I also want to.
Option 1 is more of a status quo.
No, option 1 bans paid parking.
Well, I know, but it's what we got right now. It doesn't change anything.
Because of the moratorium, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think, I don't want to ban anything, but I think we're kind of forced to have this conversation right now, and the right decision is, I think, to do what's best for protecting the ecosystem of downtown.
So I just want to, on the whole banning and zoning and private property, our zoning ordinance bans lots of things, doesn't allow lots of things.
Yeah.
So it's just to keep in mind that,
right,
any regulation found in any zoning ordinance of any town is some restriction of private property rights.
Right.
And specifically on the walkability piece, I do think what Councilor Egan was talking about, if if paid parking is a thing that's allowed, then people may choose to use lots for paid parking. Whereas if it's not allowed, then maybe that's not the best use of an entire lot. And you see more of that infill development, which adds some housing or mixed use. And then you do create better conditions for mixed use atmospheres and, you know, alternative methods of transportation. So I do think it goes kind of both ways.
Right. And last night when I was really thinking about this, I was arguing myself in circles, honestly. You can ask my husband. He was just like, "Are you okay?" And I think too is if you remove one economic option of paid parking, doesn't mean any other economic option is less viable. So, right, you remove that option doesn't mean they can't use their land for other purposes. I also want to recognize that a key part of the discussion that we heard from the public was also about equity with nonprofits. That's not addressed in this memo. I did talk to the manager about this, making sure that we do get that addressed. And if it's not a part of the sweeping land use policy, but it's kind of part of the punch list before we finalize.
Yeah, so we had briefly discussed that when we did the memo and had the moratorium discussion. That, I think, from a process standpoint, those are two distinctly different conversations. I think that the land use conversation is about usage on the face of the earth, and the conversation, as I understand it, with nonprofits is, do we have nonprofits that are struggling in the community, and how might the town council deal with that?
In terms of parking and requirements and shared use.
And there were a couple of options that we kind of briefly laid out, but so this land use is a Kyle conversation, the other one is a Brett conversation.
Yeah, I'm offering my comments with open eyes that while most of the town had a fairly unified voice, when we heard from two property owners that are very much in support of option one, there's another property owner that owns a significant lot in town that would benefit from being able to offer paid parking, and we're specifically going to remove that as an option.
Yep.
Not intentionally and not happily at all, but that I think we need to understand that that's the ramification if we did go with option one. Yep. But having said that, I do want to make sure that we get to a point where we're offering, if we can get there, to offer clear guidance, and it doesn't have to be tonight, I should say, I don't want to push it. But I would hate to deliver a mixed wishy-washy direction and ask staff and the planning board to work on that. So at whatever point we're ready, I think we should not commit to never changing our minds, but commit to saying it's very likely that this is the direction the council as a whole would like you to go, and it's very likely we would support what came out of that direction. I hope that wasn't too vague.
No, it wasn't. And I think I was going to say what I thought I was hearing, but I don't think that's true. And I do, you know, when I say like maybe paid parking makes sense in the future, I don't find myself ever being in favor of sort of like predatory private companies running private parking facilities in town. It'd be more like, could it be a tool the town could leverage for economic development? But that's a conversation like so far down the road.
So I guess I'm a little confused, right? So we've heard from the community, majority is not in favor of paid parking. I don't believe paid parking furthers our interests as a community or a town at this point. But I also think we have a unique moment right now. We have a moratorium. We have time to investigate how we want to use parking and what we need and how much of it we need, and what the relationship between the business community and the town and all stakeholders is. Are we missing that opportunity to have a more detailed discussion and analysis of this? Because I feel like we've done some good work, and now all of a sudden it was just sort of like, well, are we okay just with these three options, and just sort of kicking it to the planning board, and then we know where it's going to end up. And this situation came about because we had multiple stakeholders feeling like they had no options, and they went a certain route, and right or wrong, but that's what brought this up, and I feel like making a quick decision and just saying, we're gonna ban paid parking doesn't allow us to really look at the issue and make sure we've done our due diligence all around and are coming to something that, yes, we may change our minds in the future, we always reserve that right, but like, why would we do something? It just feels like it's too short-sighted at the moment, and maybe I'm the only one struggling with that, but I know which way I'm leaning, but I feel like this is our moment to do it, because if we don't do it now, we're not going to enact another moratorium. We're not going to have this opportunity to revisit the parking landscape as a whole. And I think we've heard some other folks say things like, you know, do we have enough parking? The Fall Festival weekend, you know, there were no spots. And like, I think we need to be honest and open and have a real discussion around how much parking the town needs, where it should be, how we should look at it. And this feels like the moment to do it, and I just don't want to lose that opportunity.
Can I?
Sure.
So, I am gonna disagree. And not that I have a vote, and I know I don't have a vote. But I feel like the town of Freeport, before I ever arrived, had made some decisions and made some policy choices that we are just beginning around parking, around how to incentivize the development of housing in the downtown, in the VC1, VC2. And I feel like we are just beginning to see that take shape at all. And so my biggest concern with the Walker study is the data feels like a time and place over here and not reflecting where I think it's going to be over here. Like, do we know once these two new housing developments come in with a requirement of one parking space per unit, that we're not going to have people parking all over? You know, like, we don't know what that looks like yet. And so I want to give council what it wants. That's my ultimate goal. I don't know how to give you the data that you need to be able to make those decisions when I can't predict what the landscape is going to look like, because you made choices over here that we are just seeing coming to fruition. So that's my only concern, and I think it's super important that council's comfortable making the decisions that it's making. And if you need more data and information, I want to get that to you. I don't know how to get that to you. And so I would need some more direction.
You know, I think, Councilor, go ahead, Councilor Egan.
I just want to point out that the Fall Festival, which we just saw, brought in thousands, maybe 10,000. I don't know how many people came. A whole bunch of people. We should absolutely have a parking nightmare on the weekend that brings 10,000 people to this town.
Absolutely.
And the organizer thought ahead and got an arrangement with LL Bean in their corporate parking lot, which has 20,000 parking spaces. I don't know how many it has down there, but there were lots of empty spaces, and they had shuttles running. I volunteered right out here in Town Hall parking lot for the whole morning on Friday and got to watch it all ramp up. And those shuttles were running every 90 seconds. I don't know how much more convenient, but how many people drove right by that big sign that said "Park here" because they wanted to park, you know. So that's going to be a problem no matter if we have this many or that many. So I guess I'm hesitant to say we have an issue with managing parking because we just had this festival and people couldn't find a place to park. That's a win. We had no parking available. Isn't that great? That should be something we should be applauding, because if we're going to plan and build around making sure that we have enough parking for weekends like we just had,
10 or
then,
so weekends.
then it's going to be tumbleweeds the rest of the year blowing through all of that parking space.
I absolutely agree with that 100%. And I think, you know, maybe this could be helpful guidance of thinking about the end, what do we want the end product of downtown to be? I know we'll never get there, but like our vision, what's our vision for downtown? And what's the role of parking and how do we make that happen? And, you know, Freeport doesn't exist on its own. We're not the only community in the world to have probably a similar recipe of challenges and needs. What are other best practices that have happened that have shown to be successful or not successful? You know, we don't have to solve everything. We can look to other examples. That's just one of my thoughts. Certainly, I don't think it's a unique challenge.
I mean, I think we are fairly unique in our shared parking model and the fact that we don't have a pool, like a large pool of municipal parking downtown. I think some downtowns have that large municipal pool. They might have municipal parking garages and, you know, and it's easier to say, you know, we as the town feel like we need to, Councilor Pillsbury's point, like X number of parking spaces downtown. As the town, we ensure that those spaces exist, and now we can do all sorts of things with parking. We can make no minimum parking requirement downtown for businesses because we know as the town that we've already satisfied our parking capacity needs. But in Freeport, we sort of used this shared parking model and incentivized it to act as the communal parking pool, and by allowing paid parking, you enter into this unknown if you try to keep the shared parking model of how many people will, it's impossible to know if, you know, a few people with small parking areas will transition, or if you'll see some of the larger parking owners convert their spaces too. So that's, I think, what makes our situation a little more unique than some other downtown areas.
I think that's really special, because I remember a lot of the consultants talking to us early on in the downtown vision, and they said the model, the holy grail, is park once.
Yep.
Right? Come to town, park your car, leave it there, and just spend the day walking around town. And most towns strive to do that, and the solution they wind up with a lot of times is, well, the town should spend money to buy a lot, take it off the tax rolls, and reserve it for parking and try and recoup some of the money by charging. We figured out kind of a evil genius way of doing it and saying, you all pay for it, but we could just ensure that it's there. Sure. So it's complicated, it's hokey, it's kludgy. It works. People come, they park once. And it doesn't matter which lot they use, and the people who live here know the secret ones where you can find the spots. So, yeah, I don't want to screw it up.
I'm sure it's so helpful.
So I think I think I've heard a desire to take this moratorium as an opportunity to really dig in. I've heard a concern that we want more community input. I've heard the concern that we have what we have at this moment and maybe we just need to let everything pause for a while. And I want to get you where you need to go. From a staff perspective, having the pleasure of sitting here and in the back table for the planning board, I really don't think council wants to move this item onto the planning board until you know for sure what you're looking for. So my question for you is, it does not feel like you're ready to make that decision tonight. What are some things that staff could do to help you get to a point to make a decision? Or is it a matter of you want to go do your council activities out and about and talk to the community and just take some time and come back and talk some more? I just want to make sure we are utilizing Kyle's time. And if you don't need more from him, great. But if you do, I want to make sure we're really clear what we want from him.
I don't need any more from Kyle. I'm good.
So do we want to put this on another future agenda item as a other business? Would that work?
Mm-hmm.
Do I see, yes?
Yeah, I think.
If in the interim, given our calendar, I'm going to guess this might end up on like the 18th of November. If we're doing this, that means you're going to end up likely having to extend the moratorium. And I just want to we can try to get this in on the 21st and rearrange some other things.
I personally don't see a concern with extending the moratorium if we're doing our due diligence.
Yeah, or we could make a decision and say, while we're doing this, this is what we're doing. While we're understanding the problem, we ban it.
It would still have to go back to planning board and.
Yep. Yeah, it will take an ordinance amendment. For me, I don't have a path forward. I don't have one way or the other. This is a purely political decision. I just want to make sure I am facilitating what you need.
Maybe you could reach out to counselors or vice versa, counselors can reach out to you.
Yep.
And then when the two of you, Sophie and Joanna, when you feel like
we're ready,
we've got consensus, maybe not unanimous consensus, but when you feel like, it seems like there's a reason to bring it back, we can put it back on the agenda.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to our next conversation, which is the downtown TIF extension draft from Brett Richardson.
Hey, everybody. Brett Richardson, Development Director for the town. I'm excited to bring this item forward, and it's something we've talked about for a fair amount of time. A little further along in the parking discussion. It started back in December, I think, in earnest when we talked about the dog bone work group, this opportunity that we have expiring TIF districts that have been in place since 1996, the Desert Road Industrial Park with L.L. Bean, some downtown parcels with the Village Station project, as well as the flagship. Those districts have been really productive. They've had great assets invested in Freeport. That districts are about to expire. So we have the opportunity to extend these districts for an additional 20 years. You talked a little bit about it earlier tonight, but it's a pretty great opportunity for Freeport because it allows the town to continue to use the original assessed value from 1996. In other words, what the land was worth back in 1996, and then followed with the investment with the facilities that we've seen in town. That incremental investment is new value that generates tax value for the town. We have the opportunity to extend these for 20 years with that same increment, which means that these TIFs, the dollars that have been accruing annually for close to 30 years, will continue to accrue. And we'll have the opportunity to have resources on day one to move forward in investing in what the community really has done a lot of work over the last 5-10 years to identify as consensus. The downtown vision, the Route 1 corridor that we're studying right now with the Village Corridor Initiative, and a bunch of other great things. So this is a unique opportunity. And back in May, the council authorized the town manager to engage Bernstein Scher to assist the town to develop an application, and we're bringing forward a draft tonight. Before I get into the details of that, it probably makes sense to give you a sense for how this would tonight factors into next steps. And we'll work back from the fact that we need to get this to the state by December in order for them to have a nice lead time to approve it by the deadline in March. So actually February. So we're, I think, in pretty good shape based on the consensus that we've discussed over time. But the idea would be that we have a draft tonight for input. You guys take a look at it. We come back on the 21st of October in a couple weeks to set the mandatory public hearing. And then we would hold the public hearing on November 18th. So that's kind of the time frame. So tonight is really an initial discussion of this draft application. And I want to hit a couple high points for you. The key thing for, if you're a local taxpayer out there listening to this discussion, this approach really maintains the status quo that's been in place with this tax revenue over the last decades. Currently, the parcels are sheltered at 75 to 80%, and that means that of that incremental value, 75 to 80% of that is dedicated into TIF funds, and 20 to 25% of it goes to the general fund. So these parcels will continue to contribute to the general fund, while at the same time setting aside resources for the public priorities. So if you're by adopting this or moving forward with this TIF, you're not reshuffling the deck for how these parcels contribute to the tax base. It allows the prior obligations and development programs to expire. So it's essentially a clean slate to update the investment priorities based on the current priorities, not what was set 30 years ago. A lot of the revenues over time were dedicated to credit enhancement agreements, which are great tools, but they're tax rebates to developers to help incentivize and support development. Those resources that were priorly going to credit enhancement agreements will flow into the town coffers. So the town will have the discretion to use those resources to invest in community priorities, which we'll get to in a minute in terms of what this program, this draft program, allows as eligible expenses. So just to reiterate, these parcels over a 20-year extension are expected to contribute close to $6 million to the general fund. So it's not a small amount of money. We expect that this extension to generate close to $18 million of TIF revenue that we can invest. So it's a dedicated funding source. And then another important point is it extends the tax shift benefits. So because the value from these parcels are sheltered at that 75 to 80%, when Cumberland County or the state of Maine does their calculations and distributes their levy around different communities, the value in this $85 million, give or take, is not part of that calculation. It's off the books for the state and the county. So because of that, we benefit from the tax shift. And we saw that in our budget this year, where the town value went up, but our county tax liability actually went down, because the value in the broader county was generating value that changed because of the formulas, meant that other communities were paying more. So this maintains that status quo, which is positive, to the tune of close to, I think it's $2.725 million over 20 years. So again, not a small amount of money. And then when we talk about how the dedicated TIF revenues can be used, this development program, which we'll talk about in a second, maximizes the flexibility for that. So it can be used for anything from capital improvements. If we discover through the Village Corridor Initiative that we want to redo Main Street, or we want to add some utilities to make some parcels developable, we can do that. We can do marketing, economic development marketing. So we can dedicate these resources to FEDC or to a different partner who could help us do marketing. We can use these funds to finance debt. So we could bond against this dedicated revenue. That's a pretty standard practice. Engineering, architecture, administrative costs with administrating it. So we have some flexibility to fund some town manager time dedicated to this. We have some flexibility to fund other staff related to implementation of this. Affordable housing. Sophie mentioned earlier, public facilities. Loans and grants. I was pretty flattered that Bath literally copied our program with the same name, the same, like almost exactly. So we have the ability to continue to fund that successful program. We can fund transit. and, TOD development. So the real guardrails here, there's maximum flexibility here. If you look at the development program on, it's called Table 2, on page 2, I think is where it begins. There's a table there with eligible costs. There's a number there. That number, for example, the top capital costs, there's an estimate of $12.5 million. That is simply an estimate. That is not binding. There's no commitment there. That's not a cap. Once this TIF is set in place and those revenues accrue, this town council, the next town council, and the town council after that will have the flexibility to allocate these resources based on what's needed at that time. So just keep that in mind, that we're not trying to pigeonhole anybody into decisions now that will be in place for over 20 years. The flexibility will be there. And it's important to note, too, that, this has been vetted and developed with Bernstein Sure. So we're pretty confident that this structure is going to be adopted by the state. And it's pretty innovative in the way it's used. The only guardrails is that, as Sophie mentioned earlier, 75% has to be dedicated to either affordable housing or transit-oriented development. But you've probably heard it, in this room 10 times. We're so lucky that we have the Breeze bus with 4 or 5 stops in this corridor. We have the train station, and that creates a transit-oriented development geography that doubles down on that flexibility. TOD TIF is the most flexible TIF available, and our land that we can apply those funds to happen to be, some of the most valuable land in Maine, frankly. So we have a lot of flexibility here. This has been well vetted. We have a process to move forward to get input from FEDC, to run it up the flagpole with the state, and to implement the council's goal for this year by extending this TIF. So really at this point, we're looking to fine tune input from you on what you'd like to see. A decision point, for example, is, are we comfortable maintaining the shelter rate at 20 to 25%? Do we want to shelter more? Do we want to shelter less? I think this proposes the status quo because it's fairly easy to understand, hopefully. It's pretty straightforward. It maintains contributions to the general fund, but it also allows the town to really be proactive and invest on the sooner side to accelerate the implementation of all the good work that we're doing. I think, I've said it once, I'll say it again. The town's done a lot of planning, and this gives us the opportunity to move quickly to implement that. So that's one decision point. Do you want to adjust the shelter rate at all? Beyond that, I think we've really put the work in to maximize the flexibility within this development program. And as an example, I would use the broadband expansion costs on page 413. We haven't really talked about that much as a team here, but at the same time, we may want to do that in the next 20 years, so it makes sense to have that in there. That's one example of how this development program casts a wide net. So you and future councils will have a lot of flexibility based on opportunities or challenges that arise over the next 2 decades. So that's kind of the overview. It's pretty short, pretty sweet. It's based on a lot of discussion, a lot of consensus across a variety of boards, committees, and partners. And the next steps, like I said, would be to come back on the 21st where we can discuss further any changes you'd like to see. At that time, we would set a public hearing and come back on the 18th of November if we're comfortable at that point in time, and send it up to the state.
Does transit-oriented development include multi-use paths?
Yes.
Awesome.
I think this is great. Thank you for your work and for FEDC for your input on this as well. Just out of sort of curiosity and due diligence, when you're kind of going through and creating this menu, what was your process, and are there things not on this menu that could be, and why didn't you include them?
It's a great question. I appreciate it. I think the last time we were here, when we asked for the nod to go ahead and put this application together, we shared a 2-step TIF strategy. And the first step is to extend this TIF because it's time sensitive, And it's also relatively prescribed, meaning the state created this new opportunity to extend it within certain guardrails that happen to fit what we're talking about. So within that opportunity to extend, we've maximized the potential there. But further going forward, the thought process is to come back next year with a bigger, broader TIF based on findings and recommendations from the Village Corridor Initiative. We're going to know a lot more in 6 months about where we want to put our chips relative to the corridor. We're also in the process, positively, very excitedly, of generating a pipeline of projects. You know, we've got 2 projects on Depot Street that would be in a broader TIF that could generate resources. We know of other projects in the queue that could do the same. And then we understand through some work with the build-out analysis, through the Village Corridor Initiative and other conversations that we're having, that when Kyle's successful, he's left, good for him, that when he updates the zoning with the planning board on the C1 and C3 zone, we're creating opportunities there. And we want to time the bigger TIF to capture that. So this is the best we can do with this one. It's very flexible. The next round, we can build around this.
Thanks, Brett. And I just want to clarify that I think we've heard this from you before, that because we're converting this to a transit-oriented TIF, this does not count against our allocation of how much potential acreage in town or percentage of land use we can shelter through a TIF. Is that correct?
That's correct. Let me find the page to direct you to, but there's actually...
So we're not artificially hindering the discussions we're going to have next year about the Route 1 corridor potential TIF discussion, because we've already gobbled up a certain amount of volume with this one.
Correct.
So that's +1.
Yep.
+2 is it has revenue in it right from day one going forward, so we don't have to wait for things to accumulate, which allows for much better planning and lightning execution, might say. And then +3 is that it's that the credit enhancement agreement, which is usually the carrot behind the TIF when they're first originated, those expire and we're under no obligation to continue that. We could choose to do something with those, but otherwise, all of the revenue that is identified coming in right now sticks with the TIF bucket.
It does. I think...
That's part of the shelter.
That's well stated. I think if we think back to a couple meetings ago where the town is entering into a public-private partnership on Depot Street to move a stormwater line, if you look at capital costs, that top bucket, I mean, there's flexibility there to support a good project with this that's not necessarily a credit enhancement agreement.
Right.
But the next round, next year's TIF, it will probably make sense to do what's called an omnibus TIF, in which you can create the flexibility to create a credit enhancement agreement. So we do not have credit enhancement agreements baked into this.
Yep.
That's coming up next.
And then my last question is, I had some feedback from constituents about the term tax shift that gets people's hair up in the back of their neck. Can you explain, for the record, what's being shifted and from where to where?
Sure.
I understand. I just want to make sure I'm sharing it properly, but
Yeah.
at least I think I understand it.
So if people think about the way that the municipality, the town, allocates the tax burden, everybody has a property that's valued at a certain rate. And the town allocates the tax liability for every property owner based on their value relative to their neighbor's value. It's an equitable way to allocate the tax levy. So you have a house, a lot, a parcel, your neighbors do, and you all kick in to the town coffers based on what your value is relative to the whole. The state and the county do the same things. They just, instead of it being a private house, it's Freeport and the neighboring of Yarmouth. And Freeport's value relative to Yarmouth and our other neighbors are how the state and the county calculate who's got a what freight they have to pay to carry the weight. And so what the tax shift allows us to do is by keeping the new value off the books, the state and the county doesn't recognize that when they allocate the resources across other communities. So it's a way of keeping our value low, and it doesn't count towards our liability. So it makes a lot of sense to leverage TIF, and to the point that you made earlier, transit-oriented development is exempt from the 5% cap of land and the 5% cap of valuation. And we have the ability to TIF land through the dog bone area that's, I think, close to 10% of our value. Because that land is exempt through the TOD geography and structure, we have a huge opportunity in Freeport to work within the system to maximize our benefit.
So the tax shift is allowing us to maintain where we are, or even potentially reduce the burden of taxpayer dollars going to the county and, what was the other one?
The state.
State.
Oh, the
Revenue
state.
sharing.
Yeah.
Right, revenue.
So in other words, these parcels currently, the sheltered value is roughly $85 million.
Yeah.
So if we allow these districts to expire, in the state's eyes and the county's eyes, our value
goes
goes
up.
from 2 billion something to 2 billion plus 85 million.
Right.
And then that factors into their calculation, and all of a sudden, our county tax goes up, the mill rate goes up.
Right. So typically, or maybe more conventionally to someone who's not listening to our meetings at 9:50 at night, tax shift sounds like something's coming my way that I'm going to have to pay more. And so I'm just trying to get the language out here and get the point clarified that in this case, tax shift is a real positive benefit for the taxpayers in the community, as well as what the council's going to be able to do in the future.
To put it bluntly, essentially by sheltering revenue, you're shifting the burden onto your neighbor. That's the reality of it.
I might be oversimplifying it, but the way I think about it and I explain it to people is that the town has to pay tax to the county. This is a savings.
Yeah.
We're avoiding raising that tax.
Right.
And the state shares some money with us. This increases the amount they share with us.
They share with us.
So
Right.
the tax shift is a net benefit, if I'm adding the numbers right, $136,000 a year more in money that the town will have.
Otherwise, we would be paying that out.
Right, or not getting it in, yeah. So it's I would say it's a tax savings.
Yeah.
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 Great.
To be
Tax savings.
simple
I
about
might
it.
use that word now.
And then while I'm talking, the other point I wanted to just make is that in addition to the $136,000 in extra money that we would have, that we would lose if we don't extend the TIF, we're also, if I'm doing the math right, adding the two TIF extensions together, we have $972,000 that we're reserving for these uses.
That's a good way to put it.
Right,
Yep.
which includes a whole host of things, maybe helping to pay for public safety building and a bunch of other things. There's 4 pages worth of stuff we could spend it on, but we can also change our minds about it.
That's exactly right.
Cool.
And that's all available in the application that was linked online. There's a series of tables that you can see the years and how these have performed over time, and then there's projections for how they would perform over the next 20 years.
Sorry, there's one more thing I wanted to point out. With extending these TIFs, nobody's getting a guaranteed tax break. We're not refunding any money to any developers, to any property owners that may have been part of these in the past, but the extension, everyone is paying the same amount of tax they would pay if we don't renew the TIF. Is that correct?
Yep.
Awesome.
So the other thing I can just add from our assessor, just in case people want to know, we are currently at about 1.5% of available of land TIFed, so we have about 3.5% left. So just
And that would be the case if we extended this TIF, and even if we established the next one, that percentage would stay the same.
Anything else for Brett? Thank you.
Yeah. Do you, just to be clear, do we feel pretty comfortable about this, or is, yeah? Good. All right, then we'll come back with almost the same, we'll put the dates into the application to set the public hearing and clean it up and make it formal, and we'll bring it back.
Good work, thank you.
Great work, Brett.
Thanks, guys.
Just one comment, businesses don't understand tips. These are so complicated. It is so, the more that we.
Can you go up to the podium, just because I know Tom
Mike,
will
Mary.
tell me that.
Thank you. We were talking about this at FEDC this morning, and Brett has done a nice job, but the businesses do not understand this. It's very, very complicated. We all know that. So the more we have talking points in language, thank you, Brett, that's really helpful. The more we have talking points in language, then FEDC can help talk to businesses about it too. Because of course, what they ask about is credit enhancement agreements of future builds. So our ability to be able to talk about it is super important. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have one more item on other business that is not on our printed agenda, but is in the posted agenda online. This is just following up on the request that we received from RSU 5 to create the Early Childhood Transition Task Force. This is to become compliant with the free appropriate public education requirement that needs to be in place by July 1st, 2028. They have a meeting schedule in that email, with the first meeting being October 29th and the last meeting being January 7th. It seems like this task force will look at facilities and models and workforce needs, financial planning, working with community childcare providers, and district impacts for becoming compliant.
As I read the letter, it talks about needing to submit a letter of interest, but it really looks above that, like what they're saying is that's what goes out to the whole RSU 5 community, but they want counselor. So I think it's a matter of us just giving a name.
Yep.
Which, after you decide, we can do.
So the ask is, they're looking for council representation on this task force.
If someone really wants to do this, please speak up, but I'm the only one with kids in the district. I told Maura I was going to get sucked into this. As long as I don't have to fill out an application, I would be okay with doing it.
To be very clear, I said nothing to Councilor Pillsbury before this meeting.
How
We
many
just made
Councilor
eye
Pillsbury?
contact, and he knew.
But we all thought the same.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, for making it easy.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Councilor Pillsbury. Sophie will make sure you get on the appropriate emails. All right, and with that, our next item is executive session. I don't have it right in front of me, so Councilor Smith, could you please read the be it ordered?
Be it ordered that the town council enter into an executive session pursuant to 1 MRS Section 405D for discussions, 406D for discussions related to negotiations with Teamsters Local 340.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are in executive session. Are we meeting here, or?